Chair. And we're live.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Partnership Scrutiny Committee. I just need to read out the following statement. The Scrutiny Committee meeting is being conducted remotely in accordance with the coronavirus regulations and the remote meetings protocol agreed by the Council, which will operate alongside the Council's standing orders to ensure that we continue to take democratic decisions in an open and transparent manner. I would remind members that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Can I request that you all switch off your cameras and mute your microphones when you are not speaking to ensure there is no unnecessary background noise and to help with the audio and visual quality of the broadcast? The Council's standing orders and code of conduct will apply at all times during this virtual meeting in the same way as ordinary meetings, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. Can I also remind members to ensure their chat function is switched on and to use that facility to indicate to me when they wish to speak on a particular item. Please do not speak until I invite you to do so. And remember to unmute yourself, unmute your microphone and switch your cameras on. Okay. Right, so looking at the agenda, any apologies, Neil? I know Councillor Linton and Councillor Whitehead have sent sort of apologies just in case they can't make it. Anyone else?
No other apologies received, Chair.
Thank you. Declaration of interest. Any declarations of interest? Okay, there's a silence. I'll take that as a no. Minutes of previous meetings. Can we ratify them, please? That's pages 3 to 4. Hopefully you've all read them. If not, take your time to read them, and can someone sort of ratify or put forward that you're happy to pass these minutes?
Chair, just one point on page 13.
Yeah.
It's basically along the question of members asked the following about would the committee be able to have an informal briefing with officers. It was mainly just the informal meeting with like one officer just to advise us of what NORS is, but mainly a meeting for us councillors to be able to focus on in what we're going to be discussing. That was the main emphasis of it.
Okay, that's duly noted. Is that okay, Neil, to note that?
That's noted, Chair, thanks.
Okay, anyone else? Are we happy with the minutes? Okay, no one's come back, so I take it we're happy with the minutes. Okay, so the item number 4 is the Norse joint venture partnership. Now, I believe we've got Tracy Brooks doing the presentation. We've also got Lyndon Watkins and Mark McSweeney, Managing Director and Director. Would that be correct?
That's correct, Chair. Lyndon and Mark will be doing the presentation. I'll just be doing the intro. Thank you, Chair.
Fantastic. All right. And I've just seen, Councillor Linton. I believe you've just arrived.
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Linton. Okay, Tracy, off we go.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Scrutiny Committee, for inviting us to present to you today. So just by way of a little bit of background about the Norse Partnership, this was formed in July 2014 and is a partnership between Newport City Council and Norse Commercial Services Group. We entered into a 10-year joint venture agreement, and that's where the company Newport Norse came from. And the purpose of that was to help transform service delivery and provide improved property and facility service for the council. So prior to July 2014, all those services and facilities management all asset management was done by the council under the in-house property and asset management service. That included all frontline maintenance and repair services, as well as everything that we do which relates to estates, cleaning, property professional services. And what's happened is that's all transferred now into the Newport North joint venture, and they offer what we call a total facilities management service, and includes all of those things that I've just mentioned, but they also help us with the delivery of capital construction projects, surveying and valuations and all those sorts of things. So the partnership is the first public wholly owned local authority property services joint venture in Wales, so we're the first to do that. And it's a solution that allows public bodies to formally collaborate and provides an alternative to a traditionally outsourced private sector delivered market offering. So before we set up the partnership, obviously we considered a number of different options that would be outsourcing completely, and it was felt that the joint venture arrangement was the best way forward, was the best suited to meet the council's needs. So all property services have been transferred to the joint venture, but the council retain a property manager within the regeneration, investment and housing team to oversee that contract. All assets remain owned by the council. I think is really important to stress that. So it's just how we manage those assets that's been transferred to the joint venture. So we're going to outline to you today what the partnership has achieved over those intervening years since July 2014 and how it's performed. And we've got a short presentation, as you mentioned, Chair, which is going to be delivered by North's colleagues. So if that's okay, Chair, I'll hand over to them.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Lyndon Watkins. I'm the Managing Director for Newport North, and I'm sat here in our Craddock house at Clepper Park offices with my colleague Mark Scrutiny. And as Tracy said, we'll try and give you a brief overview of our history since 2014, what we do, what's gone well, what's not gone so well, and a little bit about the future opportunities and challenges that we face together as your partner and collaborator in terms of the delivery of property services and FM. We've got a brief presentation, so we're just going to try and share that with you. Hopefully the technology will work. This is where it sometimes fails us, so I'm hoping it's gonna bear with us. Okay, Chair, are you able to see that as our presentation?
Yeah, absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Excellent. So I'm going to I'll just give you a brief overview of what we're going to talk about. So I'll give you a little bit of background about the Norse Group, a brief overview of the joint venture, what we do, what the governance and performance management arrangements are between ourselves. Touch a little bit on how we've performed, what our achievements have been, and a little bit about the future opportunities and challenges. And I'll put up a slide with some key contacts, and obviously members will have opportunity to ask questions. If we can keep those for the end, that would be great. So in terms of the Norse Group, we have a number of public-to-public partnerships across the country. Essentially, our parent company, for want of a better phrase, is Norfolk County Council, and a lot of this grew out of the long gone days of compulsory competitive tendering many years ago, and when the Norse Group formed MPS and NCS. So we have about 30 of these arrangements across the country. We also contract directly with local authorities. We provide a wide range of scope of services, different, and in each JV, the scope of services is different. And we employ about 8,000 colleagues across the country and turn over around about £340 million per year. So, as Tracy was saying, I think we came into being in 2014. That followed a review of property services in 2013. I think there was a scrutiny review at that time. I have seen the paper. It looked at a number of options. I think the challenge was at the time Newport Property Services was seen as not performing as it should, and there was issues around skills, capacity and performance. At that point in 2013, looked at the number of options and you considered that the JV was the preferred option, and that's when we came into being in July 2014 on a 10-year agreement with a contract value of about circa £7 million per year. And it's at that point that I joined Norse, having come from North Somerset Council as head of property and asset management there, and prior to that worked with Torvine County Borough Council, and Mark has a similar background in local government. So at the point of transfer, it cheapied around about 200 staff into Norse, and with the thoughts that all property and FM work should flow through us. And we implement, for example, the service level agreements between the council and schools in terms of cleaning, for example. There are some exceptions where schools have devolved budgets and have choices in terms of their local management of schools budget, whether they procure through us or not. Many of them choose to do so, and in fact this year is probably a record year for us in terms of schools spending their money with us. And there's still some retained in-house cleaning in some areas of the council. The JV was established so that any profits that were generated are shared between the council and Norse, and essentially it's an insourcing model where work would have gone out to the private consultants and other contractors in the past. It comes through Norse, and that generates profit and returns a rebate to the council. This slide, actually, I won't go through every bullet point, but these were the benefits that the council thought they were going to get at the time of the original scrutiny review in 2013. And essentially, it's really around generating increased value for money. There was a lot of concern when we came into being about the welfare of staff, their training and well-being, and really about ensuring that there was job security going forward for those staff, and that the service improved and provided better value for them. Our governance arrangements, essentially we have a board which meets on a quarterly basis, and there are 3 representatives from Norse and 2 from the council. Beverly Owen, your chief executive, sits on the board alongside Councillor Miqdad Al-Noami, alongside myself and 2 colleagues from the Norse group, including the managing director of NCS Services, Justin Galliford. We have a joint liaison group that meets immediately prior to board with a number of representatives from across the council, including a number of senior managers such as Marion Rushworth, Deb Weston from Education, Tracy herself sits on the board, and a couple of representatives from schools in terms of Mark Rowlands, who's the business manager at St Joseph's, and Richard Hughes, who's the headmaster at Alway Primary. And then there's below that there's a regular client team meetings that meet on a monthly basis. So there's a significant interaction between ourselves and the council in terms of the management and overseeing of this partnership arrangement. I apologise for that slide. That's our structure, so it doesn't probably come over too well. What I'm trying to highlight on there is in the boxes that are shaded green, they're essentially new posts. So what we established when we took over Newport Property Services, essentially a lot of the middle management posts had been stripped out, and there was a lack of skill and capacity. And over the last 7 years, we've been building back that skill and capacity in order to properly deliver the services that you expect and to the standard that you expect. So what we do, first of all, we try to work closely with council colleagues to make sure that your policy is followed and that you're optimising the use of your assets. So we assist with the planning of the capital programme, and we support a number of council groups and facilitate the number of council groups in doing that. One of the big things that we're involved in and where Newport has been exceptionally successful is in bids to Welsh Government for further funding. The 21st Century Schools programme, you've gained a lot of traction in terms of investment in terms of social care, where we supported bids for improvements to social care facilities. We also work alongside your health and safety colleagues in order to make sure that the buildings are a safe environment for building occupiers, and we produce alongside with colleagues a number of guidance documents that are generated either for schools or other colleagues across the council. We've also developed specific software systems such as C365, which is our system that manages all the compliance and statutory testing data for the council, which we're just at the moment we're rolling that out across all schools, and essentially it allows them to see how compliant their estate is and how up to date the testing is. So we deliver all of that statutory testing and inspection. So things from gas safety testing through to electrical safety testing, that's done on a routine basis. We provide building maintenance services, cleaning to a number of schools. About 38 of the schools we provide cleaning services to. We buy and sell property on your behalf, mostly dispose of property at the moment, but occasionally there will be an acquisition from time to time. We're involved in all the construction management, so where there's new schools such as Baysleg, the new leisure project on the Riverside, we're working closely with you on that. The Transporter Bridge, those type of projects we are heavily involved in, providing project management to that. And one of the areas of service that has sort of developed, this didn't transfer at the time of our inception. We're heavily involved in the private sector leasing scheme in terms of providing cleaning services to the void properties and maintenance services. And that's been a significant growth area of work for us as the council has sought to house homeless people. In terms of performance management, there's a whole list of stuff there of things that we do, and I won't go through them one by one, but you'll see that I have regular meetings with the chief executive of the council. We have our board meetings. We have teachers liaison group. We attend school governors meetings when requested, and the Association of School Governors meetings we'll be attending in the near future. And alongside that, we provide value for money reports, and also highlight any work where we've done in terms of corporate social responsibility and volunteering stuff that our staff are involved in, and link back to some of the projects that we deliver on your behalf. In terms of compliments and complaints, we undertake an annual customer survey. We did up until the pandemic, which is we do that across the group, so all of our JVs, and it's done by a third party on our behalf. That's sort of broken down during the pandemic for understandable reasons, so we still undertake a local one, and the annual local one is just about to be initiated over the next few weeks, and we report the findings, any feedback we get from that. We report back to the client team and to our board, and then if we receive complaints through that process, we obviously go out and investigate and try and deal and solve those to the client's satisfaction and the end user satisfaction. In terms of where are we now, when we started, we had a turnover around £7 million a year. Last year we turned over £16 million. We now employ over 300 staff in Newport. The majority of those staff live within 10 to 15 miles of the office. We have imported some colleagues from further afield than that, but the majority live locally. We support craft and business apprenticeships. We're heavily into providing professional training. One of the reasons for that is that, like all organisations, it's sometimes difficult to recruit experienced professional staff at times. And we've found it much more successful to bring younger staff in, train them, and that helps a lot with our retention. And we've got quite a high retention rate in terms of keeping people within the business. The contract itself runs until 30th of June 2024. In terms of the finances that it generates, over the years that we've been in existence, we've generated rebates of circa £2.6 million, and we think the one this year will be somewhere in the region of £460,000 to £480,000. That slide gives you a quick sort of picture of some of the other people. So we work on your behalf, we do a majority of our work for the council, but we have a number of other clients for whom we do work, generates an income, generates a profit, and that gets rolled back into the money that the council receives. So available Morgan's on there. We provide catering services at St David's Hospice Care and cleaning in the city of Newport. There's a number of other clients that are either regular clients of ours or one-offs that we've undertaken from time to time. So in terms, we're talking about what's worked well. Well, and obviously this is my perspective, and members might may well have different varying views. But I think we've been a great success. We've rebuilt skills and capacity in the business. We have excellent relationships with the council colleagues, and we work in very close collaboration with them in terms of trying to make sure that we can get the best for each of the pounds that we spend in Newport on behalf of Newport, and also that where we can seek and gain extra funding from Welsh Government. We've developed a strategic asset management plan alongside colleagues. We've developed a load of guidance documentation. We've introduced a corporate landlord policy. We've obviously been successful in maintaining and growing employment from 200 to 300 staff. Alongside that, we have an excellent health and safety record. So we're really proud of what we've achieved and what's worked well. There's some things on the other side of the coin in terms of what's been a challenge. Well, sometimes there are misconceptions and misunderstandings relating to JV. But the things Tracy touched on, we don't own any of the assets. You own all the assets. We spend your money on your assets. So we spend council funds. There's always some myths around our costs, and we've compared our costs. We provided benchmarking reports to the council in terms of both our trade rates and professional fees, and that's proved that we are well within what you would deem an acceptable value for money range. Communications, as I said on there, isn't it always a problem? We could always do better. It's always a challenge, and council colleagues in the client team are always challenging us around that. And obviously the pandemic itself has been a huge challenge as well. But I'm really proud of the way colleagues here within Norse, working alongside the council colleagues, have responded to that. And we've managed to maintain services right the way through the pandemic. At the moment, out of 300 staff, I think we have 2 at the moment that are suffering from COVID and self-isolating. But we've managed to manage that really well through that period. Looking forwards, partnership's got about 3 years to run. We'd like to continue to build upon our success. We'd like a longer term arrangement beyond that with the council, but obviously that's for the council to consider and decide upon. We have a huge pipeline of work to deliver over the next few years. The leisure project, the transporter bridge, Baysleg School, they're just a few, they're the bigger ones, but there's a huge number of small projects as well that we're close to delivering, besides the routine statutory testing and inspection, the routine maintenance, helping schools, helping colleagues across the council deal with what is a difficult estate that, like all councils, suffers from long-term underinvestment, and that's no different in any authority that you would find in Wales or across the UK, in my experience. We obviously need to improve our communications, because obviously sometimes people, I'm aware, receive some very mixed messages about us, and obviously we need to work harder with clients and end users to make sure that they're satisfied with what we do and they understand why we do it. And we need to deliver that rebate this year, the 460 to 480k. That's key. You know, it's one of the things that I'm held to account for from both the council and both my colleagues in Norwich, where our headquarters is based in terms of the Norse Group. And that's just a slide there that shows some of the added value stuff that we think that we bring in terms of the softer things that are around the partnership, where we're involved in volunteering. The staff have volunteering days that they can invest back into Newport. We attend school, we've attended schools, forums, schools open days to try and support that. We're keen on making sure that we leverage the local supply chain and use local suppliers wherever possible, and that we maintain local employment. So there's a number of things there where we think sort of adds to our value proposition, I think, is the management speak. In terms of key contacts, I'm the managing director. Mark, who sat with me, that will flick back to the screen in a moment, is the sort of director of professional contract and services. Fiona Teague has been with the council pre us coming into being, and has sort of flourished within our organisation as our head of asset management and valuation. And Jake Jones runs our head of soft air, under which cleaning sits. And Jake's got an interesting background. We sort of poached him from Asda some years ago. So we've got a mix of skills and abilities. And our main contact is through our property services help desk. And I think at the moment we're running at about 8,000 contacts per year.
8,000 orders, I think it's
22,000. Sorry, 22,000 contracts, 8,000 orders. So there's a huge volume of activity that is generated through that help desk. So apologies, that's a very brief and quick trot through what from my lens about what we've done, where we've come from over this last 7 years and where we've arrived at. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, Lyndon, many thanks for that. Really appreciated, and it was, there's a lot of detail in there, which was, as I said, great. Okay, so what we'll do now is we go to the committee and sort of ask you some questions if you're okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely, yes, of course.
Okay, so looking at the order, Councillor Suller and Councillor Mogford. So Councillor Suller first.
Thank you, Chair. Lyndon, if I may call you Lyndon.
Of course you can.
Thank you. It's a very comprehensive thing you put up for us, and we do appreciate that, because that's what we need to scrutinise things properly. And how can, as a council, how can we help you any more than we need to do? Well,
to be honest, it's not. I'm not trying to be sycophantic, but the council's been really good with us. Look, in the early days, when there's a new organisation comes into play, there's obviously some distrust. But we have formed really good relationships at the senior level and at a management level. I think in terms of how you can help us is give us some feedback in how you would prefer us to communicate. Sometimes, particularly the communications challenges that we face.
Yes, and I think it's not always about value for money. It's just working together, isn't it, Lyndon?
Absolutely, and we'll never be the cheapest. What we're trying to do is make sure we do the right job at the right time in the right place for the council, and that we respond in the right way, in a professional way, and we do the right thing. And yeah, it is all about partnership.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor. So, Councillor Mogford.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Councillor Mogford from the Langston
Ward. Sorry, right. Just a quick one. Can we stop sharing the screen? Because it's sort of taking up.
I think we're just trying to master the technology and failing miserably after that. So apologies for that.
Fine. Sorry, Councillor Mogford.
Okay, so I've got two classes of questions. My first one is really to see how well I was paying attention to your presentation. So I'm looking for some clarification and a little bit of further information. So you said that your turnover was around 16 million.
Yeah.
And that you have 300 employees. So that's a turnover per employee of about 53,000. How does that compare to similar companies, management companies? Because it actually seems quite low to me.
It's the makeup of that turnover. In terms of because some of that is just delivery of some services such as cleaning. Some of that is professional fees, etc. In terms of our JVs across the country, in terms of how we compare, we are one of the bigger JVs with the scope of services that we do. I think the turnover there is, in my view, is probably relatively high, to be honest with you. We're a little bit lower.
Sorry, I'm not questioning that. Well, my second question is on the turnover, but my first one was on the turnover per employee. So many of those employees will be staff like. So we have a range of employees from cleaners through to technical and professional staff. So of those 300 staff, probably 150 of them are cleaners. Right. Okay. That helps. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the number of those will be part-time. Right. And we also have facilities assistants. So the facilities assistants at the civic centre are ours. So technical and professional staff, we're probably based in this office. Technical and professional staff with admin, probably somewhere in the region of 60 to 70 of those office based.
Okay. So if you could help me visualize a pie chart, and it might be a very simple one. In terms of your turnover, where does all the money come from? You know, in the pie chart, your 60 million, how much is coming from the council? How much is coming from the other activities you said? And then that would relate to me back to the profit sharing, because I find that interesting. So
the majority of the turnover is from the council, the vast majority. But within that, if you differentiate between contracted, the money of which we're guaranteed is probably about £6 to £7 million, maybe a little bit more. The majority of the spending from the council is spending that you have a choice over. I think about 46% of it is intended or discretionary business from the council. And about 5% of our income is from non-Newport City Council clients. So 95% of our work is quasi with the council. Much of that is also links into Welsh Government funding.
Right, but does the Welsh Government funding come to you, or does it go through the council to you?
Both.
Okay. I don't want to dig any deeper, but I do find that quite interesting. With your indulgence, Chair, can I ask a second question?
Of course you can, Councillor.
Yeah, okay. My other question relates to the schools. Recently, we were made aware of an issue at the St Andrew's School, which seemed to be quite catastrophic. Can you give any comments on that and how proactive you are? Because it's not clear, perhaps, how the issues that affected the St Andrew's School and how vulnerable we are to other schools having big issues. Is that something you can comment on?
I think it's probably difficult for me to comment in detail on the St Andrews in this forum, if I'm honest.
But in general terms, in
general terms, the issue to St Andrews was an issue local to St Andrews. It's not one that we expect to find common to other schools. It was a particular set of circumstances that relate to St Andrews.
I think sort of on that, Councillor Maltby, if you want to sort of go into more detail, sort of the contact sort of direct about that individual school.
What I'd suggest, Chair, with your indulgence, is that if Deb Weston is the client for the education team, and it probably in the first instance the query should be directed. We would of course support her, but probably should come through Deb.
Yeah, that's fine. I think also, just looking at this, I think Councillor Mogford's frozen. Councillor Mogford? Okay, Lyndon, okay, we'll take that on board, absolutely, and that's noted. Lyndon, are you there?
Yes, yeah, I am.
Yeah, I thought everyone was frozen. I thought maybe it was me who's frozen there. I was getting fly back.
No.
Okay, from Councillor Mogford, we're going to move on to Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. I can see Councillor Mogford is leaving as well. It's mainly just a follow-up on page 21, something that my colleague was noting about the different percentages. My understanding, obviously, is the first part, the majority part, is what's contracted to the main assets that the council owns. The second part is about the tender discretionary business. Now, it's that bit I'm keen and interested to find out about. Obviously, there is different kind of comments being made by different schools, different school governors, things like that. There, you kind of addressed maybe the negative points already in the first part of your speech. Thank you for that. My question is mainly about how big a portfolio do you have across the schools? Is it all schools? Is it like 2/3? What type of percentage do you work within the schools? Is that a challenge? And where do you see moving forward? Because obviously it's something that the joint venture would like to, I assume, have all schools going through North. But where do you see yourselves currently, and where do you see yourselves moving in the future, please?
Okay, so we do work with all schools, but that splits out. There probably isn't a school that we don't do some business with. We provide all the statutory tests and inspection for all schools because that budget is sort of hypothecated off, and we deliver that on behalf of the council. In terms of the school's discretionary spend, I'd have to come back to you with the detail around that, but that has gone up significantly over the last couple of years. And this year is probably our record year in terms of discretionary.
I think it's up 235%.
Yes, I think it's up something like 235%. The challenge, really, to be honest, is that between both the schools and the council, there's a challenge around funding, and obviously the schools, they want to get the biggest bang for their buck. Understandably, sometimes that. Not always, but sometimes that leads then to cutting corners in terms of who they might use, whether they are, whether they should be being used in the first place. And that can then lead to some tensions because that sometimes falls outside of some of the council policies. And obviously we are sometimes seen as trying to feather our own nest, which we're not trying to do. We're just trying to protect the council. In terms of moving forwards, we have with Deb West, and we've set up a contact group with education colleagues. So a number of primary schools are involved in that. We have a working group with heads from Liswerry. The Maindy primary head was on as well. The business manager from Killeen Secondary. So we have like a focus group, if you like, in terms of talking through any issues that arise in delivering services specifically around education and how we might make those improvements. And that's on an ongoing basis. So, and we use that group where we are rolling out things. We talked about compliance C365, which is our compliance testing and inspection software, and rolling that out. So we pilot that with that group and then roll it out. And we're about to pilot whether we can start to develop building development plans with that group. They don't know that yet, but we've had that discussion with education colleagues today. So it's constantly evolving, to be honest with you, Councillor.
It's probably worth adding that Northall provides a number of roles, but we act as the landlord's agent in making sure that, if schools or any other delegated budget holders want to undertake works, that they have to do that safely and by employing competent contractors and all the rest of it. Now, the council say system of work is that they would employ North to do it. They don't have to, but what they can do is just employ any old Tom, Dick and Harry off the street to do it. Has to be a competent person because there's asbestos in these schools, amongst other things, and we have to make sure that whatever's done is done safely, which isn't always the cheapest but it has to be done safely by competent people. So that's first and foremost.
Thank you. Chair, can I come in with 2 further questions, if that's okay?
Of course, Councillor Marshall.
Thank you. So you mentioned about cost already, and that's a big kind of negative that's obviously communicated amongst, as a school governor, cost is always a big thing. And again, thank you for raising. My question is, in terms of using yourselves or in the joint venture that we have as a local authority, what is the benefit of having the joint venture? Do we get like better rates? Do we get like a kind of like buy in bulk rates, or however you want to put it? What benefits do we get in terms of cost that we might not necessarily hear of on the local level, please?
Yeah, so there's 2 things there. So the first thing is we benchmark our hourly rate. So for instance, for our carpenters and plumbers, and very recently, only yesterday, I think we reported to board a piece of benchmarking we've done locally, where we benchmarked our hourly rates against the local market, and we're about average. And similarly, in terms of profit and overheads that's placed on materials and plant, we're about average as well. But of course, what we're also doing then is providing a rebate back to the council on the profits that's made from that work, which of course you won't get from any private sector companies that are employed. So essentially we're recovering and insourcing that profit back into the council. But largely where you'll have issues mentioned by the school, they'll say, well, I've got something in and it's half the price. Well, my point is always that if the competitor contractor is employing their staff on NJC rates, they're buying the same materials and the right materials, generally from the same builders merchants that we are, there shouldn't be a huge variation in cost. Where there is huge variations in cost, it's because something different has been priced. And I'll give you a very broad example. At a school where we provided a price for some work, they went off and said we've got it for half the price. Well, the windows we priced were structural aluminium, and we'd allowed for asbestos to be removed, and the contractor that came in just put cheap PVC in, which wasn't structurally sound and disturbed some asbestos. So at the end of the day, you get what you pay for. But in almost all the cases I've looked at that have been raised to me, where something is claimed to be significantly cheaper, it's not the same thing as being priced.
So in terms of that rebate, last year, perversely, we had an exceptional year last year in terms of turnover and the generation of a profit and a rebate. And our statutory accounts are just been put together now and been audited. Once they go through, I think the council's rebate for last year is somewhere in the region of £745,000.
Which is not, it's not an insignificant sum.
Just a question before my last one for the moment. So with that 50% back, so if the schools made payment for obviously work that goes split between 50-50, where does that 50% from the council side go? I know that might be officers. Does it go into the general pot, or can that go back into schools to be ring fenced around the school area, for example?
Chair, would you like me to answer that?
With that? Yeah, sorry, Tracy.
Yeah, so the profit share, so that £460,000 that's been mentioned is built into the budget. So we are expecting that to every year to make our budget work. So anything in excess of that is obviously a bonus, but that is already built into the budget.
Sorry, Tracy, just to confirm, so it goes into the general pot, not like a ring fence. So if it's the schools that use the services, that extra money wouldn't go back into school services again, as per se. It's pretty much the general pot.
No, it stays into the Norse budget, because it forms part of that built budget.
I see. Okay.
We rely on it to make the budget balance. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Thank you. the last one for now is mainly, you know, as a school governor of 2 schools, both with aging buildings, where do you see the challenges of that, especially with aging buildings? You know, like things like grade 2 listed, grade 1 listed, whatever it might be, you know, looking at, you know, projects that will actually cost a lot more money than a normal project would, especially new modern buildings. How do you kind of see that along the estate stock, and where do you see it moving in the future as those assets obviously age further and further?
Okay, it's a very good point. The average age of the council's estate is 60 years of age. That brings with it a number of challenges. Also, standards are raising. We've got aspirations around carbon net zero going forward. So all of that, we work very closely with colleagues in the client side, and in particular in education, in seeking to gain extra funding from Welsh Government, and we have been successful in that. You had extra funding in terms of concrete repairs that has been allocated by Welsh Government to the council. I think a sum is somewhere in the region of £2.6 million, and we've done so. The first and foremost, we help try and secure a greater share of the pot, if you like, for Newport, and we've been successful in doing that. We then work very closely with that schools group, looking forward in terms of how we provide guidance and assistance. And one of the areas that we're now looking at is how we perhaps roll out a process of building development plans going forward, so that we understand, so that school, one of the criticisms from the schools is that they're not quite sure what the priorities they should be investing in. So it's about making sure that between us and the council, we are communicating that properly to schools. So that's the next stage of improvement work, if you like, we're initiating shortly.
Thank you. Just if the chair allowed me to go, so I'm not going to mention names, but one of the schools in my area has been trying to undertake something for a long time, such as toilets and things. It's just mainly the factor of how you know, the procedure moves forward from the project planning. Do you feel that there's a full understanding of things that need to be done? Because I think there needs to be permission sought for, like, landlord consent and various other things there. Do you feel that there's full understanding of how to approach those and moving forward, along with all the other kind of, I will say bureaucracy behind that, in order to make sure it's all legal and, you know, kosher? Yeah,
I think there's a better understanding than there was, whether we're at the right place yet in terms of whether we've communicated. There are guidance documents. There is the availability. You know, what I would say is that my colleague who manages that area on behalf of the council is Warren Teague, who is our senior building surveyor. The schools, you know, we would prefer the schools to contact us and speak to us, and then we can explain what needs to be done, because that, you know, that almost is prevention is better than the cure, to be honest with you. So we're more than happy to provide that initial, you know, there isn't a charge for that. That's, you know, that we're happy to engage with colleagues on with schools on a case-by-case basis.
First and foremost, the purpose of the landlord consent process is to ensure that the schools are operating safely. This is all about, you know, safety and making sure that there's some level of control there, that if the school are undertaking a project, that they are going about it in a safe manner.
Yeah, and it's to prevent, it's also to protect the body corporate in terms of its vicarious liability.
And you know, members will know there's an increasing amount of statute coming forward. We've got a new Building Safety Act coming out next year. The building regulations in Wales are changing this year, so we're getting increasing statutory guidance and controls over works on public buildings. You know, we've all heard about Grenfell and the issues there, and that's obviously feeding a lot of this legislation. So first and foremost, it's about making sure that work is done safely, and this is part of the council's safe system of work.
Yeah, and so one thing I should add, so we continue as we evolve our services, we continuously review what our own skills and capacity level are. We're just adding another senior building surveyor into Warren's team because of these issues that we're regularly getting now around not just the schools, the whole estate, because of its average age. So that we've got that level of technical expertise. We've just secured somebody from the private sector that lives relatively locally that will be joining us within the next few weeks.
Thank you for that, Chair. I will finish my questions on education there, but I would like to come back after. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. I've got Councillor Linton next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, gentlemen. It's a very good report you put forward, quite concise. I'm just on an angle with regard to the impacts on your delivery of schemes and projects you've got ongoing at the minute and projects you've got in the pipeline. Now, I've been finding that it's been very difficult in respects of getting tenders returned. Now, for the lack of labour or the like, some contractors are not coming back, they're not fulfilling to the contracts or going forward. How is that going to impact at the present time with your tenders and your projects you've got ongoing with relation to the subcontractors and the like, for getting them to come forward for projects? Are you having any difficulties in that respect?
Yeah, yes, we are. That's a very, very good question, actually, because that issue hit us, of course, obviously with the pandemic, and just at the start of the pandemic, we were out to tender on the John Frost project, which is over £90 million worth of investment in there. We did manage to get 5 tenders back for that one, and there's been problems around the pandemic in terms of contractual problems, in terms of companies basically approaching the council, looking for claims and all the rest of it. Now, part of our role, and I'm a chartered quantity surveyor myself, is to manage and defend the council in respect to those issues. And to date, touch wood, there's been no successful claims against the council in that regard. It is quite difficult to get some contractors interested in working for the public sector again, and we've had, and you may have seen it in the papers, we had 2 successful tenders on the Transporter Bridge project who both gone into liquidation, particularly contractors who've overstretched themselves in the pandemic. There's been no end, go out of business. So what we're having to do is do a lot more work in networking and speaking to construction companies in the market to line them up and get them interested in tendering for the council. So touch wood, at the moment, it's working for us. We have as well brought in, and Mark and I have worked together probably 15 of the last 20 years in various organisations. Mark works at a very senior level and networks at a senior level across South Wales. We previously worked together in the west of England, and we have managed also to get some of the contractors over there as almost interested in Newport as disruptors to the market, because it can become very cosy in one part of Wales if we don't bring in some others to bring some challenge to that. And we are seeing some success with that as well. It's something that the senior colleagues in the council, the leader, question us about quite regularly in terms of the impacts, the very question you've raised, actually, and it's something that we're continuously working at, and we continuously have to work very hard to try and mitigate the risks that you've articulated, to be honest. Yeah, so it's an ongoing process.
So on live projects, we have a team of quantity surveyors here, and they're working with the designers, be it whether they're external architects or whatever, to look at what's being designed in individual projects and the availability of that in the market. So, for instance, materials like aluminium, which is 80 to 100% more expensive than it was last year, we'll try and design a different type of approach to avoid using those types of materials. But as you probably know, even basic materials like timber, plaster, timber's 3 times the price it was 2 years ago. So we're having to be, I suppose, we're all working a lot harder.
Basically, then that's what you're trying to do. Yeah,
exactly. And on the whole, if I give an example with the Transporter Bridge a visitor centre, that went out to tender 14 months ago, and subsequently the contractor WRW went into liquidation. We've put that back out to tender and brought in a couple of other contractors to disrupt the local market a bit more. And we've actually had a tender returned, bona fide tender, less than 4% of what the original tender was in terms of increase. So from my perspective, that's a success. You know, we've got a really good quality tender for a minor increase when, you know, we're seeing some tenders coming in 20, 30, 40%. And on the face of it, for no apparent reason, whether it's profiteering or not. But
you have hit upon a very relevant point. There are challenges with some of those contractors going into liquidation. It means that sometimes with specialist jobs there are limited numbers of providers around some of that work. So it's a constant challenge for us.
So for instance, one of the big issues we're having is with mechanical and electrical subcontractors and as part of larger projects. So as we have a very good mechanical and electrical team in Norse, lots of the guys worked for the council previously and they're absolutely top draw guys, we've done some of that work ourselves in-house to save money. So rather than putting it out to private companies and even work with external contractors to do that in partnership, just to get the jobs within the council's budget, you know, because a lot of the budgets, for instance, you know, the 21st Century Schools projects, those budgets were put together by Welsh Government in 2016, which is quite a long time ago, unfortunately.
When I was tendering as well, I got to know my local market and I got to know my competitors. And if the competitors are dropping out of the market, obviously you're going to increase your tender price, aren't you?
Exactly that. Yeah.
This is what you're going to find now, which will then increase everybody's costs. We want to keep them down. So
I mean,
that's on the council then.
Yeah, I mean, our quantity surveyors are probably working as hard as they've ever worked in their professional careers at the moment, basically to make sure we're trying to get as close to the council's budget as possible. But it's an ongoing task, and you know we're up to the challenge.
Sorry, can I ask another quick question?
Of course you can, Councillor.
What local apprentices are you taking on, and what sort of fields are they? Mechanical, electrical, or what?
Yes.
Those.
It makes us feel quite old some days when we see how many young people we're employing at the moment.
We haven't got large teams of staff. Our direct labour organisation is probably around 35 staff now. Yeah. In terms of guys on the tools. We are very lucky in terms of the guys that are, for example, our heating engineers are fantastic. We get wonderful feedback about those from customers. So, but they are, shall we say, they've got less time to go in their career than they've had. Let's put it like that. So what we're trying to do is buddy them up, bring apprentices in to buddy up and learn and develop those alongside colleagues.
Well, we've had 5, the last cohort of 5 carpentry and multi-trade and M&E apprentices have all gone on now to full time, you know, craftsman level. So we've just brought in the last 3 months another 3 apprentices, and we've got a business, actually 2 business apprentices in the office, so two young ladies in the office as business admin apprentices.
So both trades and admin.
Yeah, okay. And a lot of trainee. We've had 2 trainee quantity surveyors who we've just recently promoted.
Yeah, and same with on the valuation side, we had a mature student on that side that's gone through. So as I mentioned, we find it much better to try and we recruit for enthusiasm when we train for skill, and try to bring in younger people in and develop them through. It leads to much better staff retention.
And a lot of the guys, including myself, I was a carpentry joinery apprentice a long time ago, have worked their way through off the tools. You know, so we've got quite a lot in there. So there's a great deal of experience in the building, which helps us no end.
Okay, right. Thank you very much for that then. Great.
Lovely. Next I've got Councillor Suller.
Sorry, Chair, I did write in the box. Can I come in on off a piggyback about apprenticeships? So I was going to ask later, but seen as it's on the topic, it would be worthwhile now.
That's okay, Chair.
Yeah, okay, go on, Councillor Marshall.
Is that okay? Thank you both. Thank you. My question, one part of it was already partially mentioned, but my question is about the wage that you pay the apprenticeship / encouraging the basically decreasing the gender gap. I know you mentioned 2 ladies, I think there. What is the organisation trying to do to encourage more females, especially to go down the route, especially with the tooled kind of apprenticeships? Because that's something obviously that we don't see as much. And where do you see it moving in the future, please? Thank you.
I think the answer to that is probably not enough. If I'm honest, it's probably one of the areas that we probably do need to develop.
Yeah, it is an interesting point, because we were at Landward School as part of a careers fair, and we support the council in that. And it is quite difficult to garner interest from young women into the industry. What we find a lot of the time is that they'll come in here to do work experience, or we'll take them on in one form and then they'll develop into another. So for instance, we've got a young lady from the Department of Work and Pensions Kickstart scheme who's got a law degree, but she'll end up going down the valuation and asset management route, which she wasn't aware of before. But and we have a number of colleagues who operate as mentors and ambassadors that go around to give presentations in schools. And
I think we've been successful in the office and in the sort of traditional trades, sort of QSing, valuation. We've addressed the sort of gender balance there, and brought well, we haven't done it with our direct labour organisation yet. So I think it's something for us to pick up on.
It's a difficult thing to attract young ladies onto construction sites, but having said that, it's a lot safer, a lot more professional environment than it used to be, and we are seeing more interest than it was previously. Certainly not enough, though.
Chair, sorry, Chair. Can you hear me? Just a quick one.
Is it regarding to apprenticeships, Councillor Linton?
Well, it is in a way. It's regarding the value that the wage that they're on. Actually, I don't know whether is that.
So our terms and conditions, we transferred on standstill terms and conditions. So we employ on the same basis as the council employs.
So you're saying, so an adult, 30 years of age, for the first year could be on minimum wage, under minimum wage.
No, we pay the national living wage equivalent. Yeah, at least,
and there's different and there's different rules for apprentices as well, for mature apprentices.
But I'm quite happy to provide that information, Chair, separately. I'd have to go back, but I'm happy to provide that back through the clerk if that helps.
No, there was a reason why I asked that question. I'll follow it up elsewhere. Right, thank you.
I think sort of it's touched on in the report which Tracy's put together as well.
I know people are getting paid, adults, below minimum wage for an apprenticeship.
Okay, if you can chase up, obviously in the right route, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. I just queried. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Suller, thanks for your patience. Councillor Suller.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Sorry, Mark and Lyndon, I forgot to tell you I was from Marshfield, Councillor from Marshfield. I apologise. You have a management structure, right? We've seen it on the computer. Do you have meetings with the chaps on the ground floor, so to speak?
Absolutely, we do. We have regular meetings right the way through the organisations. We haven't been able to do it in the last 12 months in terms of, we used to get together at Lysets, where we had a big enough room in terms of getting everybody together all at once, in terms of the guys on the tools and guys and gals on the tools, the people out there doing the business for us, the area cleaning managers and all the technical and professional staff. So we try and do that. One of the things we do, we had a ceremony yesterday where staff nominate their colleagues, where they've where they've sort of contributed and done great customer service. Staff nominate their colleagues. We had an award ceremony yesterday, so we give colleagues a certificate, and we also provide them with a £25 voucher in terms of that. So we had people off the tool where we received good customer feedback. So we had guys yesterday in the office, people off the tools, our young lady who administers the void service. So across the board in terms of looking to recognise success.
Thank you. 2 more questions, please, Chair, if you don't mind. Right. You know the schools. Do you check them on a rota basis, or any buildings that you need to go to? So
the council commissions condition surveys, which we undertake on a rolling programme. We also then sort of support schools where they request it. We go out and visit and respond to requests from schools for support.
There's also then the compliance visits as well. So, you know, the emergency lighting testing, the electrical testing, the gas boiler servicing, the gas tightness testing, you know, lightning conductors. It goes on and on and on. There's a huge list. So there's people going back and forth to schools, testing and inspecting all the time, essentially, as well as the more strategic stuff, which Linda said about the quinquennial condition surveys. And then we also engage with the with the forum at the secondary level. There's a business manager forum, sort of the guys who look after the estate. So we engage with them, and also we've got this contact group as well, and we engage with that. So we try and get in any way we can, to be honest. And we're invited. We're more than happy to come out and visit and engage if invited. Yeah. So you may be aware there was a couple of issues with some of the boilers in schools recently with the failing tests and what have you. So within 2 weeks, our own chaps in house, we managed to put temporary boilers in on those schools to keep them going. You know, and that was a huge turnaround and a fantastic effort by the guys on the tools. And that just goes to show the benefit of having that resource in house. The council having its own resources that can call on to get things up and running very quickly. I know from experience in other authorities that didn't have that. It's a lot more work to deal with these sudden boiler losses and heating losses.
Thank you, Chair. My last question is, I noticed there's nobody from the police authority roundabout. Would you like to have somebody from the police authority to be on the board?
No, how the board is constituted was as per when the contract was brought into being, and so it's for the council to determine who its representatives are. So we respond to wherever the council who they nominate on an annual basis.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sala. I've got Councillor Marshall, Councillor Spencer. So Councillor Spencer first.
Thank you, Chair. So a lot of my questions have been answered. Just one quick one on tenders. You do take on a lot of work. Do you know when to draw the line?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, yeah. Yeah, I mean that is, you know, it's on our risk register, to be honest with you, in terms of our growth and making sure that we have the skills and capacity to deliver it. And it's a constant debate. And as I said, we just recruited even additional staff in terms of we've got a building surveyor joining us who's been recruited. We've out for recruitment for a building fabric surveyor. So we're adding extra resources all the time to make sure that we can respond.
So we've taken our 5 completer apprentices on now full time, and then taken on another 3 apprentices behind them, and we're looking at another electrical apprentice. So it's almost a constant thing, really, to keep bringing people in, training people up and bringing them along to service the demand.
Okay, thanks. And I just one point, Chair. I'd just like to say thank you for all the work you do, because the schools I'm involved with always got praise for you. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very kind. Appreciate it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spencer. Councillor Marshall, I know you had your hand up. Didn't know if that was the piggyback on the last question.
Thank you, Chair. There's actually other questions there, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the one, if I feedback before I ask about the partnership itself, obviously the main point of the perceptions is quite negative against Norse, and that's from personal experience of being in various meetings and things like that there. What do you think are the main concerns of that negativity? I know some of it was already mentioned, but also what have you done to try and rectify that?
Well, in terms of that, so there's a couple of streams to that. When people draw complaints or issues or allegations, I mean, one thing I heard once that somebody believed that we'd installed a toilet seat for 400 quid somewhere. You know, there's stories that almost become urban myths, and they're very difficult to sort of disprove, if you like, because we've never ever, I can assure you, installed a toilet seat for £400. I also had the experience. I remember going to Queen's Hill School, where I walked past. I was walking the grounds with a head to have a look at a building at the back of the site, and she pointed to a bit of Harris fencing and saying, "You charged me £1,000 for that." Well, actually, obviously, it caught me cold. I didn't know how to respond to that really, because I wasn't aware of it. When I went back and checked on it, it was actually we charged her £1,000 for about 3 or 4 jobs cumulatively, and not just the Harris fence. But again, that Harris fence goes into urban myth. So it's really difficult to dispel some of that urban myth. So what we do, every time when we investigate it thoroughly, we engage with the schools in terms of that price comparison, in terms of are we comparing apples with apples? That's what we're using the contact group for. What we probably haven't articulated well enough is the fact, it's probably the first you've heard about our benchmarking and the fact that our trade rates are within an average range, that our on costs are within an average range. So we need to communicate that much better, because obviously we are failing to, you know, that perception is out there. It's something that we've not.
Yes, and it's about comparing apples with apples. I mean, our trade workforce are paid the local government pension scheme, so you know, so that's a higher cost to the business than you know than if we were completely private and paying a stakeholder pension scheme. But we're still competitive, and this always, you know, when so the group that Lyndon mentioned, the head that we've got with the head teachers, we asked them to bring examples forward where they're not happy. And you know, 99.9% of the time when I get presented with that and I drill down in a forensic exercise, it's invariably a different thing.
Now, occasionally, the number of calls that we handle, I'll be honest, if we cock up, excuse the French, we do it in spectacular style. And we had an issue, I think last week or the week before, where there was an issue at handover. There was a particular issue that happened with one of the schools where they'd called in a request for service. It was at the end of the day, and just as we hand over to our out-of-hours service, and there was a series of unfortunate errors that were made, because we had a trainee on the help desk rather than an experienced person, because the rest of the help desk were receiving training, and it was almost like Swiss cheese with a series of holes lined up, and we had a problem. Now, when the school contacted me directly around that, and we fessed up to it straight away. You know, we looked into it and we accepted, and you know, that we'd got it completely wrong. We explained to the school what should have happened versus what did happen, and I received a very nice thank you from the school in terms of thank you for my honesty in terms of dealing with that. And I think it's really about being honest where we do fail, that we need to be honest about it and share that with colleagues. So we're not trying to say that we're not trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. That would, you know, if we don't hold on to our integrity and honesty, we don't really have anything, do we? So you know, it's trying to communicate that, and I'm happy to take advice from colleagues in terms of what you think we could do better and what we should be doing, because I'm more than happy to, you know, we haven't got all the good ideas.
And we've got a very open culture with all the staff, right from the bottom of the organisation right to the top, that if they find a mistake or something's wrong, that they tell us about it, rather than things being left to fester. Tell us about it. Let's see what we can do to sort it out.
Yeah. The worst thing we can do is try and cover something up, because what invariably happens, we get caught on the cover up, and it just becomes worse and worse and worse, and we just look foolish. And and I'll be honest with you, in the change of culture over the last 7 years, probably at the beginning of the relationship and in the early days, there was more, you know, there was more a tendency to try and hide and be defensive, and everybody's proud of their organisations, and I'm sure I fall into that trap sometimes in terms of being overly defensive about stuff. And we, you know, really, we do need to open up and try and engage on an honest basis, because it is a partnership. I mean, the people that work for Norse largely used to work for the council. They're people that live in this area. They're people that got children in the schools that we support. My staff, you know, their children go to Paisley, they go to John Frost. It's in all our interest, really.
Thank you very much on that point, and I think you hit the nail on the head with that last point. And I think it was former direct council staff that was employed by Norse. And I think basically it's a reputational thing. And I think that, you know, with that bond there, we shouldn't be slated something that we should be working together to, very much that case. And I think that that's something there. I don't know if it's got to you yet, but I have requested in a previous meeting that school governing bodies should have the opportunity to either have a briefing about yourselves and an open question session, and, you know, things like that there. Because I know you said you're going to the Newport School Governor Forum, I believe, but just to get out there a bit more, because I don't think it's just the head teachers that have the bad negative kind of feelings. It kind of stems from what the general school governing bodies themselves are. So you've got the parent governors, LEA governors, things like that there, which has been somewhat spoon-fed that information, and it needs to be more out there, not just a selected few that may go to a forum. And
look, we're more than willing to turn up at wherever forum you want us to turn up at, because we look. You might have guessed by now, we like talking about ourselves.
That's fine. I've got further questions about the partnership, if Chair is allowing me to continue.
Is there many more, Councillor Marshall?
Just a small number, Chair.
Okay, I'm just concerned about time, but yeah, okay, I'll let that.
Thank you. So obviously with the finding out, and thank you for telling us a bit more about the organisation. I think it's a little bit long this time to get to grasp about the organisation more in depth as a committee. And as part of that 8 years, what do you feel is the main challenges that has been kind of brought together, especially when it comes in terms that obviously it's an organisation that dealt with former council things, and what do you think is the relationship between both council and Norse, essentially? And that leads to another question in a moment. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a journey, isn't it? Over 7 years, there's a cultural change that has to take place. One of the things that I worked in I worked for North Somerset Council, I worked for Torvine Council. One of the things that when we form this sort of relationship and the environment we're trying to create is to unlock the potential of our staff. And in any change management process, there are those, there are those that embrace change. There are those in the middle that can be persuaded. And then there are some that are resistant to change. And sometimes you either change the people or you have to change the people. And the first few years were around trying to persuade, cajole, move people into a different cultural setting, that we value time, that the end user, the customer, isn't a nuisance. They're actually to be valued, cherished and responded to. And that kind of culture change has been a challenge. I think we're much better than we were. We're not where we need to be yet, when we probably never ever will be, because we always need to keep pushing and getting a level of consistency in that. So that's probably, in terms of the challenge, that's been the biggest thing in terms of that behavioural change against the context as well of, let's be honest, insufficient resources. And that's not because the council hasn't put its hand in its pocket. The council itself hasn't had enough resources in terms of the estate that it's trying to operate and maintain and manage. And the school's local budgets are not big enough, the council budgets are not big enough, and together they're not big enough. but actually we need to work together in order to make the biggest bang for the buck and make that stretch as far as we can on behalf of the council.
Tracy, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would just support what Lyndon said about it being a journey. You know, obviously we're a number of years in now, and I think, you know, the partnership has matured. You know, we would all admit there were teething problems, but it's about, over the years, us having built that trust between ourselves and matured as a partnership. And I think, you know, that is paying dividends now. You know, we work really well together. You know, we are a small client side team. There's only myself and a property manager and an assistant who sort of look after the council's interest as the client. But we do work really closely and really well with Lyndon and Mark and all their teams. So you know, it has been a journey, but it's one that is matured really well, I think.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you both. Can I add on? I've got 2 more questions, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, go on, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Chair. So on that basis, in terms of the partnership, if you ever had a dispute, how would that dispute be resolved between the council and Norse? I know yourselves are on the board and things like that, and there's different groups, but if it got to the point where there was quite a bad or a very, what's the best term? Very challenging thing to resolve, how would you go about it as part of the organisation?
I'm sure within the contract there is a dispute resolution procedure set out somewhere, but one of the things that we all agreed when we set out on this journey, if we get a contract out, we failed. We'll never get in that. We'll never get in that place. I can assure you of that. It's not our there is no need for us to get in that place. I don't foresee any circumstances in which we would be in that place, to be honest with you.
I mean, first and foremost, this joint venture contract is a collaboration, not an adversarial arrangement. So, you know, when there's difficult decisions to make, we do it as a wider team with colleagues in the council, and we come up with solutions that way.
Look, yeah,
it's a better use of everyone's time, and that's what I was saying about earlier, when issues do arise, that we nip them in the bud early so they don't become big problems.
And we do come under, you know, I wouldn't underplay as well the challenge that I get from, you know, Bev as the chief executive. You know, she does challenge us, and she does make, and so Tracy and colleagues in the client team, you know, it's a collaborative model, but it's, you know, but colleagues in the council do regularly challenge us and put us under the microscope and scrutiny, and that's fair enough, because we've nothing to hide, and actually sometimes that challenge and scrutiny brings about improvement, so we're quite comfortable with it.
And we are, you know, at the end of the day, we're local government people, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, I probably coming up prior, as I said, I worked for North Somerset, I worked for Torvine, I worked for Newport Valuation. I'm a general practice valuation surveyor. I worked in Newport, Clarence Place 35 years ago. I set out on my career as a valuer, so I'm, you know, I'm wedded to this place and to the public sector.
Thank you. That's really interesting to hear. The next one I would say is obviously with that build up and about the structures and about the working together. With 8 years experience, would you say there's anything, would you keep it the same, or would you say any significant changes or changes generally would be able to help you basically make that joint venture even better and to get better results for obviously the, you know, for the council, for the schools, etc.?
I think, sorry, go on, Trey.
No, I was just going to say that obviously it was a 10-year partnership, and we need to be looking at sort of the review of that and making a decision sort of this time next year about what happens after that 10-year period is up. So I think it's a little bit early at the moment to be answering that question direct, Councillor. You know, I think we need to review how the partnerships worked and, you know, what the council's aspirations and priorities are going forward. You know, we are in a much better place than we were a few years ago with the partnership, but I think it's a little bit premature for us to be answering that before we've undertaken that review before sort of this time next year.
Yeah, and I just add to that what we have done right the way through, we've not the contract, we haven't you know, one of the things I said, if we get a contract out, we failed. We have sort of around the edges of it, we have evolved over that period of 8 years. And so we have improved, and we have made changes in how we operate and how the council manages us, how the council oversees our interactions. We have changed that over the period of years, and it continues to change. And some of the services that we used to do energy management. It was thought better that goes back to the council, and that's been returned to the council. We've actually taken on much more void work. So it's a constant change in terms of that iterative discussion about how we can best work together and how we can best evolve this thing.
Thank you. That's really interesting to hear again about the changes and things and the adaptations of that partnership. That's really good to hear as well. Showing that, you know, it's not sitting idle. It is basically seeing where things suit best. Final one. Obviously, we're mentioning about the end of the kind of contractual obligation for 10 years. Where do you see yourselves now moving forward in the next kind of 2-3 years, and how would you see it benefiting the members, or making sure the members benefit for the duration, obviously up until the point of review?
I think how we go forward is really about making sure we deliver the huge pipeline of work that we've got between us and the priorities the council's got. I mean, you know, I wouldn't underplay what's already ahead of us. I think in terms of development, where we need to look at is probably that aspect of looking to generate further external income at some point. But at the moment, our resources are so much deployed on trying to meet the needs of the council that the focus for the short term is going to be making sure that we deliver the leisure project, the transporter bridge, Baysleg School. And they are, to be honest, I think, I can't remember how much construction we got in hand at the moment, but it's 95 million. I think it's about 95 million quid's worth. So we you know, and we still got to deliver cleaning services and all the other things that we do alongside that. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it's really what I would say. It's been great fun as well. You know, it really has. I've really enjoyed it. It's the best job I've ever had.
And I hope it's the best city you've ever been in too.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. I see no hands up, so this is the time sort of where I allow myself a couple of questions. But you probably covered most of it. But just a couple of questions to finish off. You mentioned, was it the C365s getting rolled out? Any ideas when that will be completed? And you know, everyone, no matter what industry or wherever you are, COVID has an effect and has hit everyone. Is there a backlog of work because of this? And yeah, just getting your views on that.
C365, I think, will be rolled out over the next 6 months. Yeah, it'll be finished. Yeah. It'll be finished within the 6 months to across the estate. In terms of backlog, no, we haven't got any backlog created by COVID. We've kept going right the way throughout. Our staff have kept coming to work. Our cleaners have kept going in, cleaning the facilities when they've been open. So we've worked right throughout the pandemic. We've done so in a COVID secure way. We're operating here at Caraddock House. We have a rota in terms of the staff coming in. We socially distance. We make sure we have a risk assessment which we comply with. So we've been very successful in terms of managing to maintain services and maintain delivery of work. The only delays really are around when these issues with contractors going into liquidation and then you restart a process. That's where some of the delays have occurred.
Thanks for that. I think sort of regarding your answer there, Lyndon, I think sort of and I don't have to ask the committee because I know the committee that well. If you can send a massive thanks back to everyone for working through COVID, these tough times. You know, I think they're sort of forgotten sometimes, that front line and getting out there. So if you can please pass that message back from the whole committee, a massive thank you.
Yeah, we will do, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
And my last question, and on my clock it's 1828 or near enough. So you've literally for about the last hour and 25 minutes have been answering questions, or near enough that, and it's hugely appreciated. And yeah, it's not easy. You don't know what's coming your way, and you know, not one question you've sort of had to go, you know, which you could have done. We need to come back to you on it or look into it. So I think that's a massive credit to yourselves. But I think also the hour and 25 minutes is taken is possibly because of this is our first meeting. So would you be, you know, if we put it to you or a later date, happy to have annual meetings to maybe cut your time down a little bit?
Of course, I think we did present the scrutiny some years ago. I think we were scheduled at one point, and one of the scrutiny panels wasn't called, and that led to a delay. We're more than happy to come back. Look, I'm immensely proud of the service that I lead and the staff that work with me, and I'm more than happy to come and talk for however long you want about what we do. I'm really proud of what we do, and I'm confident that we're doing the right thing. Do we get everything right? No, but we have the right intention. And so I'm more than happy to come and talk to you whenever you want, for however long you want.
Tracy?
And Chair, yeah, welcome that, 100%. Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, well, I'll finish up. And again, your passion's there. And again, well, what we've just gone through, it's great to see. It really is. It really is. And, you know, you show me someone who says they do everything correctly, etc., etc. I'd question that more than your honesty and transparency tonight. So really appreciate that. It's 6:30.
Yeah.
We have got. Well, yeah, just please go home or do whatever you're doing. Have your time with your families. We are now going on to another point or another part of the meeting, but from the whole committee, yeah, real thank you for your openness and transparency, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Before they go, may I ask one question, please? Our phone numbers, please, Lyndon and Mark.
It's on the contact slides, which we'll circulate them for you.
Okay, thank you, James.
Perfect. Have a good evening, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, Neil, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Chair.
Okay, committee, we all happy to continue? Anyone need a minute or?
Yeah, I'm okay, Chair, thank you.
Okay, excellent. Right, I can see faces appearing on my screen. So obviously item number 5, EAS value for money 2020 to 2021. I believe we've got Garen, Ed, Sarah and Andrew. I'm assuming most of us know. Probably, if I'm being honest, do you want to go straight in? Would it be yourself, Ed, presenting?
Chair, I was just going to do a brief introduction, if that's okay with you.
Sarah, the floor's yours, or the screen's yours, or whatever we call it nowadays.
Many thanks. So good evening, Chair and councillors. You'll be aware that the South East Wales Education Achievement Service are our preferred school improvement partners. The organisation supports all of our school improvement work in Newport and the 4 surrounding local authorities in the region. Newport Education Services works in full collaboration with the EAS, and each year we develop an agreed EAS business plan based on current self-evaluation evidence in order to raise standards across all of our schools. This evening's report is specifically linked to the EAS business plan from 2020 to 2021 and considers if the EAS is providing and demonstrating value for money. So this evening, Geraint and Ed will take us through the report, outlining finally the conclusions and the recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Thanks for that introduction, and thanks, Chair, and thanks for the committee for inviting us here tonight. I'll start with the reports. I'll do more the business side, and Ed then will come in on more the educational side later in the report. I think it's worth mentioning as well, I think this is the 6th year that we presented the value for money report to this committee. It has changed over the years, and hopefully I think it's getting better because we're learning a lot from it as well. And as Sarah said, it's worth noting the value for money report is based around the business plan. It's the premise of which the value for money report is based on, and that has gone through a number of committee structures within Newport for final approval. And it's also worth noting as well, the extract in the report it was compiled by Rod Alcott, which I'll come on to in a minute, but it's word for word. We haven't changed anything in that report. It's just to reassuring members of that. So if we can move on a slide then, Ed. Thanks. Okay, so the value for money report for 2020-21 focused on the delivery of the regional services and the regional impact set against a number of criteria as contained within the regional business plan, as I said. Members will note that the report does not break down the individual LA detail. It is the region. For credibility on value for money judgment, the ES company board felt that the report should be carried out independently of the ES, so we don't carry out the report ourselves. And at the request of the ES company board, an external tender was widely advertised. Rod Alcott, a former senior Wales audit officer, has successfully completed this report for the last few years, but this year we were hoping to attract someone different just to give a different perspective on value for money. Despite the tender process, only one applied to undertake this work. So for the fourth year, Rod has reviewed the value for money of the ES, so is well versed in the dynamics of the regional approach to school improvement. It is a moving feast, and every year we're looking to improve what we do. This did help in the unique operating circumstances of a global pandemic and the absence of the usual measures of effectiveness. It was very, very different this last sort of 18 months for the education world. It's a completely different climate. The considerations of effectiveness had to be rethought, and a focus was agreed on the vulnerable and disadvantaged pupils, along with a focus on well-being. So this essentially, a judgment was made to that extent on to which schools and staff felt supported, really. It was about that for the last 18 months. So due to the lockdown, report was completed in a virtual environment, which did hinder the speed of the report, but didn't affect the content or the outcome. This report has been approved by 3 governance groups of the ES. So that would be the company board, so represented from Newport there with Councillor Jevons, the JEG, which is a joint executive group, so that's represented from Newport from Councillor Deb Davis and Sarah, and on the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee, which would be Councillor Laura Lacey and Phil Hodderay. Yeah, so that's gone through a number of processes, Ed. So if we could move on. So what is value for money? Yeah, often it's an easy question to ask, but it isn't that easy to answer. And when you look around, I think in England and Wales, there are not many examples out there that we can look and see how things have been done differently. So the focus really is the economy. So just what is value for money? So economy is spending less. Efficiency is spending well. Effective to spending wisely, but what Rod has introduced to us as well is the equity, which is spending fairly, and sustainability, which is spending for the long term, which is really important. Because of the content of what we were looking at this year, you thought the economy efficiency was best put into a single judgment rather than 2 judgments, and the effectiveness then places a greater focus on well-being and becomes essentially a judgment on the extent to which schools and staff felt supported through this period of time. Equity becomes even more significant consideration given the well-documented disproportionate impact of the pandemic on vulnerable and disadvantaged pupils. It's been well published that, and sustainability centres around the extent to which revised ways of working can continue into the future as well. So thanks, Ed, for next slide. So the context to the review then, yeah. So it's really about, you know, how are we doing the right things? How well are we doing them? Are we promoting fairness? What impact you're having, and is the report or approach sustainable? And what was really interesting is that green box that we've highlighted from Rod's report there. And what Rod is saying is the green box is your intervention. Is that your intervention may be economically and efficient, but doesn't represent value for money, because what intervention you're carrying out may be the wrong intervention to carry out. So what he's saying is you need to maximize the effect of the intervention or the effectiveness to achieve value for money. So it's a really, I thought, quite a good point that he was bringing up early in the report. Thanks, Ed. Okay, so the external judgments of the ES, and what Rod has done for the last couple of years, he's always brought his judgments to the forefront of the report, and it's no different in our presentation to you then today. So the economy efficiency then is about spending less and spending well. Yeah. So in our first bullet point, then what he's talking about is the ES has increased the capacity and credibility of the School Improvement Office by reducing the cost of delivering it and maintaining one of the highest delegation rates across any consortium in Wales. In the second part then around the equity, he's talking about how the ES mitigated the impact of the pandemic on disadvantaged and vulnerable learners through the provision of a range of services designed to promote wellbeing and minimise the often disproportionate impact on those young peoples. And the effectiveness then is spending wisely. The ES has provided flexible and responsive support that can contribute positively to the wellbeing of staff throughout and schools throughout this period of time. And that's been really key. It's what we've done very much throughout this period of 18 months is finding out what it's like on the ground, is speaking to the head teachers, finding what it's like. And what we're getting back from them in the system at the moment, this term is the hardest term of all the terms they've experienced. They've experienced more absences now than any other term through this pandemic. And obviously then sustainability and spending for the long term. And in response to the pandemic, the ES is devising an alternative approach to service provision that is sustainable both from a financial and human resource perspective. We were on this journey, we just accelerated through this period of time. So we go into some of the evidence around the economy and efficiency. I'm not going to go into a massive detail, but the first one is looking at the holistic approach to resources. As many services are experiencing, it's one of diminishing resources in terms of income and staff numbers. I think we're not alone. I think there's plenty of council services experiencing that. But we're talking then over the past 5 years, we've had an 8.24% reduction in LA funding. That's been agreed with the chief execs and with Sarah and with all the committees. So that total across the region equates to 880,000 or 22% in absolute terms between 2016-17 to 2020-21. Okay, so when you take into account play awards, etc., that can accumulate up to about 30% difference to how the service was receiving those many years ago. We also, the services then is funded hugely from grants as well, through Welsh Government and how we distribute that to schools. So over that period of time as well, the ES has, the funding has come into the region, sorry, not into the ES because it comes into the region and we are then commissioned to carry out that work. That has reduced, it says 4.96 million, it's an error, it is 4.09 million or 7% less of grant money is available in absolute terms has come in during that point in time. So in total then, the reduction has been circa 4.96 million that has come in that we've had to deal with over that period of time. Thanks, Ed. Okay, this side is self-explanatory. There's a lot of numbers on here, so you can see how the LA funding is as a region, so it's the 5 local authorities, their contribution to the ES over this period of time. The one thing big that the ES inherited was around trading income. So we give money to schools and then we take it back off them from doing training. We've gone to a self-supporting model where all the training now is free, all the professional learning is free for schools, so we don't cost anything back. So obviously that had to be managed. So the total core funding has reduced, you can see there, by 900,000, 800,000 over that period of time. The grants you can see has gone from 56 to 51 million that comes into the region, and the region then, or the local authority commissions to deliver. And the delegation to school there, you can see as the delegation rate has gone from 90% in 2016-17 to 94% as it currently stands. If I go back to 2012, the circa average delegation rate then was around about 70% into schools. So you can see there's been a big commitment to increase that delegation into schools. And the residual income then has dropped over that period of time, and that's the money that funds the ES. So this what Rod is highlighting on the right-hand side is the evidence clearly demonstrates that the ES is spending less than in previous year, and the rate of reduction is accelerated, while the overall number of schools being supported has remained largely static. So what he's saying, you've got the same number of schools and you're having to operate differently. Thanks, Ed. again, this slide is basically on the numbers. So back in 2016-17, there was about 111 staff employed by within the ES. That is now down to 69 in 2021. That's a reduction of 42, or a third of the workforce over a period of 5 years. Obviously, the questions we get asked a lot, then obviously, if all those reductions, what is the impact? You know, how can you manage that service in the meantime without, you know, those less numbers? Now, in 2019, we brought in a guy called Steve Mumby. He's internationally renowned for his work on education. We brought him in to review the service, and we brought him in then in a year's time. So he carried out the review in October 2020. And one of the extracts he picked up is highlighted in that green box there at the bottom. So the ES is sure that it avoids being insular and maximises the expertise available by identifying highly affected schools from outside the region and paying them schools within the region. That's been a focus of what we've been trying to do for a number of years. This is bringing in much needed additional capacity at secondary level and enhancing the credibility and offer to schools that we're able to offer. And also then in the last paragraph, then again, this has been a journey that we've been on for about 5 years. The ES have continued to move towards a school-led system. That's what all the best education systems are saying around the world, by showing that almost all challenge advisors are serving head teachers. This has significantly enhanced the credibility of those providing support and challenge to schools, and has been very well received by head teachers. That wasn't our judgment. That's the feedback he had from heads in the system. Thanks, Ed. So this is just to give you an idea what it looks like in terms of the economy and efficiency that he's picked up. So in addition to Steve Mumby's statement, where possible, we have combined the role of challenge advisor with challenge advisor, the head teacher of the learning network school. What we're trying to do with is more special support. So what we try to do here is merge a challenge advisor and using their school to provide the expertise to that school. So rather than different people from different schools going in to support that school, it's all from one school. So we coordinated that approach. So that challenge advisor is coordinating that approach within. So across the region now in 2020-21, we had 20 primary schools that are providing that support and 3 secondary schools. Yeah, and in going into this year now, we've increased those numbers slightly further into 21-22. So going then back to the slide then, looking at some of the slides, what we're trying to do, sorry Ed, yeah, he was trying to evidence then, you know, if we retained the existing service and continued with employing challenge advisors. So back when the service was put together, there was 31.7 full-time equivalent challenge advisors. That would have cost us 1.9 million to employ. That doesn't include the 30% on costs in terms of NI and pension costs. Yeah, we now have 4.2 in the service. This is a huge reduction, costing us 253,000, again without on cost. But all that money now has gone into the challenge advisor costs. They're the head teachers. They're the ones that you're using to move the service forward. So it's 953,000 we've got in that pot. So it represents a reduction of 704,000 then, which is marries then the reduction in service cost. That's Ed. That's all right for me then, Ed. So yep, on to yourself.
Thanks, Geraint. I'll continue the bit with a couple of the final criteria in terms of the evidence summary. It is worth pointing out, I know we got language such as challenge advisors throughout this report. It is retrospective. In the past, when many of our staff were called challenge advisors, they're now school improvement partners, which reflects a different way of working as well, in the way in which we will work more in partnership with our schools than perhaps that older terminology from the past at a national level. I'll talk about equity very briefly. In terms of equity, it's about delivering for the individual, not in an equal way for everyone, but in an equitable way according to their need. And that's absolutely critical when you look at the OECD, the Organisation for Economic Development. It doesn't mean it's equal delivery, but there is mitigation in place with that. And we work very much in partnership with our colleagues in the local authority in terms of ALN provision, the wellbeing provision, our role in wellbeing, and our work with schools in supporting that. We also have a role in terms of the grant funding as well, and ensuring that the grant funding is delivered in an equitable way, that the schools that need the greater resource to support their learners, that's delivered effectively to them according to the criteria of the grant. And in terms of the professional learning support we provide, it's complemented by that targeted financial support for disadvantaged and vulnerable learners, which has continued to be delivered in terms of the financial grants throughout the pandemic, and continuing programs which we've run virtually in terms of vulnerable learner engagement and lead programs that we run virtually across the region. In terms of effectiveness, if we've come to previous scrutinies, particularly pre-2019, one of the main things we'd have been looking at in terms of effectiveness would have been outcomes in terms of GCSEs, in terms of A-levels, in terms of end of key stage results. The journey in Wales was changing anyway in terms of the use of that accountability data, because a lot of the information was that it was having perverse effects in a way in terms of the provision in schools, in that an over focus on the examinations didn't necessarily lead to a better rounded education. We're going to be talking more about that in member briefings that we're offering towards the end of November for members on, and we've discussed this with directors in the LAs about how do we get a greater range of accountability information that's more about what's going on in schools rather than performance data. So in terms of back to the report, Rod didn't have that data to look at that he would have had in previous years because it was accelerated by the pandemic. It wasn't assessment grades weren't published for the last 2 years. So the revised approach was looking at, and this reflects on Steve Mumby's work as well, our agility as an organisation of how we responded to changing needs. Garrett's talk of that well-being and support for head teachers, change, listening to our colleagues, staying close, making sure that the professional learning we could continue with virtually was successful, and there was actually probably more professional learning and training delivered throughout the pandemic. We reached more teachers than we have ever before in terms of teachers were able to attend far more virtual programs than they were the physical out of the classroom programs that was the traditional methods in the past. Relationships, in Steve Mumby's words, key to that trust and developing it in conjunction with teachers so that PL can be delivered at the right times of day as well. Simple little things that it's offering sessions in the day, sessions after school, and making sure they're recorded as well. So it's anytime, anywhere in terms of our PL for teachers with the, our professional training for teachers, that's available. Some brief evidence, you've seen the charts, they're in the report, but I would put a snapshot of some of those charts. I'm not going to go through every element of that, but this was the type of the training, sorry for some of the jargon in there for the professionals, but some of the, basically, this is a summary, a list of some of the key elements of delivery with our schools. So heads, teachers would understand what much of this means in terms of distance and blended learning. It's overall, you're seeing about 80% satisfaction with about 18% of a sort of neutral feel on most of those, and then 1 or 2 of that, well, less than 5% in the majority of cases disagreeing. We know that perception surveys is not everything, but in terms of a feel for the profession, head teachers who are professionals there, their feeling for the offer of support that we offered throughout the pandemic is described, really encapsulated on that slide. On the next slide was how they felt about our communication with them. You can see that network meetings and actually the opportunity to dialogue was absolutely critical in terms of 95% acknowledgement that that was strongly agree that they were effective ways of communicating. You'll see neutral crops up more in some of the others. So our website seen as positive, sort of 85%. That was a website which developed in the first stages of the pandemic to be much more agile in the way that we presented information to schools and sifted the information for head teachers who were incredibly pressured at that time as well. So we filtered Welsh Government messages through that as well. Email as well, seeing as positive. You'll see some of the face-to-face and the one-to-one meetings, because they weren't happening as universally, were not seen as positive in terms of that neutral, neither agree nor disagree on those. Communication key to everything. In terms of the wellbeing slide, the first slide of chart I showed you was on the delivery of programs. This was about the wellbeing support we've provided in terms of coaching for leaders, wellbeing calls, listening and responding to views, and the dialogue through the networks we had, providing network opportunities with colleagues. We know that when we returned in September 2020, perhaps some of the messages we got those messages wrong, because we were almost in a frame across the region of we're going to be able to return to normal in September 2020. Perhaps a naive view when we reflect on it now, but we were enthusiastic and we can deliver this PL, and perhaps we got the picture of what was actually happening on the ground in schools and the stresses and challenges wrong. Ever since the feedback from that, we've been very careful to touch base with our schools to exactly what they are feeling on the ground at all times before we launch into anything in a gung-ho basis. It's co-construction of what we do, and that goes for co-construction with the local authorities as well. And schools there, you see towards the end of this, like welcoming those opportunities for collaboration, sharing good practice, particularly when you're feeling isolated as a school leader in the middle of a pandemic. Sometimes just to have that reassurance and that feel that other colleagues are feeling it as well was absolutely critical. And those approaches to still planning and grant planning, because that funding was coming through. Last couple of slides. Involvement, these are some of the mechanisms as well, and you'll see the general positivity we're getting there for the mechanisms, and you'll see the local authority meetings there that the local authority offered as well, getting equally as positive praise and feedback for the listening that was done and the involvement of our school colleagues. So final one of the criteria, the sustainability, based really on our advice, guidance, support and expectations, the models of training re-delivered to be virtual, including for governors as well, where we've had more governors than ever being able to attend our PL, probably double what we'd have with physical training. Working with our local authorities to minimise bureaucracy throughout that period as well, and to adapt and to minimise some of the pressures on our school leaders, recognising that we need to develop effective strategies for teaching and learning, and recognising now towards this latter stage of the pandemic the continued need to prepare for curriculum for Wales as well, which is something coming down the tracks and remains there that schools are preparing for, and the work for that has been ongoing throughout, that we're working with colleagues and supporting on that. So and throughout that support on blended learning. And one of the lessons there, we'll never have a snow day ever again, hopefully, because that learning will be able to continue at home because the systems and approaches are there for it. Perhaps that's not always a good thing, but the support is there in our schools. And those findings from head teachers I've covered. The investors in people I will cover on what's approaching the very last slide. And this comes to the recommendations. Refinement of our internal reporting mechanisms. Garrett mentioned at the beginning that the governing bodies, that JEG, the board, ARAC, developing a mid-year review to inform the next year's business plan of that, and extending our engagement activities, and that's planned for the remainder of this term, actually, to again inform the business plan. Key as well throughout the pandemic, we've been doing a lot of work with Dr. Simon Breakspear, who's an Australian academic, and because Australia were ahead of us on the pandemic, one of the key things that he's worked with us on, and he attended the Governor Conference, was on actually learning from the crisis so that you don't lose many of the good things. We're not intending to return to normal at any stage, because what was normal before, it's keeping the best of what we've learned and learning from it. The fact that for certain things, we don't need to be expending large amount of diesel or petrol driving around the region to be able to collaborate. For certain things, we do, and we do need to be face to face, but it's recognising when. The final bit is the investors in people, which was undertaken towards the year before, achieving gold status of the award on entry, and the first time we looked at investors in people, it's ensuring that the recommendations from that are implemented as part of the value for money, and that we continue to compare the outcomes from surveys and triangulate the information. The final bit, those people management processes linked to those survey outcomes related to investors in people. Thank you, Chair. Happy all of us to take any questions.
Lovely, and thank you for that thorough presentation. I know Councillor Spencer, if you're still on, I know you sort of had to leave at 7. Was there any questions you needed to put across before you left?
No, I'm fine, thanks. Yeah, I will be leaving very.
Fine. Right. Okay. Can you press the raise hand if you've got any questions? I can't see anyone yet. So what I may Councillor Marshall.
I think I'm well known by this by now.
You were too slow there, Councillor Sulla. It's Councillor Marshall.
Thank you. So the main question obviously is with a third reduction of staff, obviously is it a big reduction? And just wanted to make sure that obviously as part of that moving forward, that we are still seeing a resilient service, because I think the differences are from challenge advisors, which are really paid potentially outside, to more emphasis on head teachers, and just the kind of cautious, kind of feeling in my mind about whether or not that we're putting too much maybe on the head teachers providing a service potentially, more so than we have before.
Do you want me to answer?
Do you want to come in on the head teacher one?
Yeah, I'll come on the head teacher element if you come in on the finance element. In terms of the head teachers, the way that the model works is that it is well funded in terms of the delivery of funding into schools for head teachers to deliver that work. What the vast majority of our head teachers who are experienced school improvement partners now will do is they will backfill. So they will ensure that as part of the funding they receive in, they are able to release other leaders from the classroom, for example, buy in supply to ensure that those leaders are also filling the job back in school, but also learning as well. So it's professional development opportunities for those leaders who are acting up. And one of the main things that our partner school improvement advisors report back is that they gain huge amounts from the experience of supporting another school. It's not just a one-way benefit in terms of a giver and receiver in terms of that relationship. You can learn a lot and take a lot back to your school by providing support to others in the system is one of the keys we've learned, and there's international research that supports that as well. Geraint, I don't know if there's anything to add on the finance.
If I can just add from a resilient point of view then from internal staff, we went into this year having to make some major savings again, and with a small saving from the local authority, but it was the grants from Welsh Government that hit us pretty hard. So even though the grants went up, as you'll see, what we were able to take out of them actually was reduced. So we had to go through a restructure again this year. We're very mindful of making sure that we've got the right structure moving forward. We took everybody across the organisation into consideration as part of the review. We're very mindful now that perhaps we call it challenge advisors, a school improvement service area, we can't go any lower than than we are there now. So we're very mindful. There's a lot of support going into staff. So even though if you think of the gold award we had in the IEP, we were going through the restructure at that point in time, so even staff were being affected, we still came out extremely well. So we are very mindful.
Thank you, Chair, if you allow. Was the kind of reduction from Welsh Government foreseen or unforeseen? And that's part of obviously the risk management that I believe we've requested before, because I think that, as you said there, that is a risk there. If there is any further reduction, there's physically no room for reduction. And hopefully there is clarity there with Welsh Government potentially and Council to know of that difficulty.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, if I do want me to come in, sorry. Yeah, we put a lot through the JEG group. We've put a lot through Company Ball. They're well adverse to the pressures we're under in terms of the grants moving, because we're 50% funded through grants. Last year, it was because of the pandemic. It was very late coming through. We didn't know through until I think it was January time, February time, where we had an early indication. But we already through some communication with Welsh Government, we were anticipating that we were having to make savings. So we already started that process before. We were already consulting with the unions back in November that this potentially was coming. Going into next year now, we have no idea what the funding envelope is going to be for us. We had a meeting today on the MTFP to see what it looks like. We are very mindful that we don't want to go through another restructure. We want to keep stability for at least another year, but we don't know how we're going to be affected yet. So it's going to be one of those late things again. That's all.
Thank you. If Chair allows me to progress one step further, just where we stand with other regional bodies as well in a similar atmosphere, because I know the EAS obviously is one of the more kind of older ones, the more experienced ones is probably a better term in comparison to other ones, and just about where we see ourselves with others as well, and are we in a better or worse position than the others to be made aware of?
Sorry, Councillor Marshall, do you mean others within the region, or do you mean the other regions?
The other regions of Wales, please.
Right. So, well, the other regions of Wales we work with collaboratively on many of the programmes. So there's cross-regional working with Gware established as long as us in the north, Central South established as long as us in the Cardiff Bridgend region. You will have heard from the news that Eru is in a slightly different position and is now partneriaeth as some of the local authority. One local authority pulled out 2 years ago, there, Newport Talbot. So that's different arrangements working through Welsh Government for that region.
Sorry, Chair, if I could just add to that as well. I think the pandemic has brought in some ways us working more closer together because of the virtual environment. You've not got people travelling to Mid Wales to North Wales. I think that the team's environment has really helped us. Yeah, that in that collaboration, and there's a lot of work going on in leadership is done collaboratively now across Wales. The coaching and mentoring, head teachers got access to that. You could be on with head teachers in the north, in the south, in the west. So it's just a different approach that we've been able to extend then throughout the pandemic, really. And it's something we'll be looking to continue beyond as well, whatever the new normal may look like.
Something, if Chair will allow me to progress a bit further. So that sends alarm bells in my head personally when it comes to things like Welsh Government funding, because would it be foreseen potentially that the Welsh Government potentially is funding less to kind of encourage the regional bodies to maybe either merge to make it even bigger regions or anything like that, or is it just basically the principle? No.
Yeah. We're using the money to go further. We're all getting to say we each know what each other region is getting, and we're using that money collaboratively to make it go further.
Okay. So it's just something that was said that made red alert just a second.
Sorry. No.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Sulla.
Thank you, Chair. May I ask Sarah Morgan, will that be okay, please? Sarah, now, are all the head teachers prepared for maybe more cuts? Because and are they in the know? Because it's important that they can work within their budgets, isn't it?
You're talking about their own school budgets, or the
individually, yes, but they've got to work individually as well, haven't they, as well as collectively, because they have their own schools to work with, don't they?
Yeah, obviously that's a slightly different topic to the one we're on this evening.
Well, it's all about budgets, that's what I'm on about. How can they manage the money, you know? If they're not getting the money from you, where are they getting the money from?
Well, EAS provide money to schools to be able to provide school-to-school support. So what the EAS provide to schools is a fraction of other grants that they would have into their school budget and their overall council payment, their delegated school budgets. I think we're all aware as public servants that we have limited resources to work with, and I think we're all aware that potentially there could be reductions at any point, but we do our very best with our schools. The schools do their very best as well. They've had financial training. We have regular meetings with those schools that look as if they might go into a deficit position, so that we can support them before we get to that point. Our schools are acting in a very frugal fashion. They're demonstrating good value for money, but we watch and wait around Welsh Government settlements, for instance, and any other grants that might come out. So we're in a position at this point in the year where we know very little about what will happen. But yes, I would say that we are prepared to be able to manage our money appropriately.
Okay, may I ask Geraint a question, please? Yeah. Geraint, what's the lowest base that we can survive on?
What do you mean by the lowest base in terms of?
What grants, low grants, can we manage on? You know, they give us grants, don't they?
Yeah,
how can we survive?
Yeah, it's very difficult because the grants that come into the region, go to the local authorities, and then through SARA, then they commission us to do the work. The total this year is around about 42 million. Yeah, that's coming in, or 52 million. Sorry. There are 44 grants within that total as well, all trying to do something slightly different. Yeah, and what we're trying to do all the time is simplify that for schools to give them more autonomy. Yeah, in terms of that they can use one grant or use several grants to do one function. So we support the schools and come in the middleman then with SARA, with Welsh Government. So it's really hard to say that if we had a 10 million reduction in grants, that would hit our schools, and how we'd manage that would have to be a conversation with the like SARA, with the JEG members to work out what is the best use of that money and how we protect schools and protect the service as well moving forward. So it is a difficult one if it was that, but hopefully it wouldn't be. But we have had pressures in the past.
And I expect the well-being of future generations that comes into that, doesn't it? And they've got to be aware, all these people who give us grants, aware that we have the duty of care.
We do, yes. Yeah, and I think another point to add as well in terms of the other grants coming in, because SARA will have some grants that are going into the local authority rather than regional grants. And what we've tried to do then, SARA, is to use the same mechanism. So we've got a tool now that is a single tool at every school, is exactly the same. So whatever grant comes in from the local authority from us goes into this one tool. So they're not having to do different things within the school. It's simplifying the bureaucracy then that schools have with all these grants as well. So again, it's just making it work or making the money go further, I like to think. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
It's insane.
Thank you, Chair. My question is just about the lack of funding, because of the potential lack of funding, that and I'm just concerned about the long-term sustainability of schools, and that schools that are under special measures, are they still receiving the same help and support?
Can I answer this one? So first of all, Chair, what I would say is the conversation is going into school budget, which is different to the value.
Right. Yeah.
But what I can tell you is that with our school improvement service, those schools that are most in need receive the highest levels of support. And actually, there isn't a limit on that support. So a school, for instance, that was in a special measures category, or indeed any school that was struggling or needed to progress further, can have as much support as necessary. And it's a case of brokering the right support. What is inappropriate is if we flood a school with support, it's not the right support, because that just becomes a hindrance rather than a help. So
sorry, go on.
So with our EAS colleagues and with our schools, we work in partnership and collaboration to talk to them, and we make a decision together about what is the right type of support that would work. And we track that support to see how a school is progressing, which then gives us an evidence base that it's the right type of support. If it's not working, we change the support.
Yeah, so my question was mainly for schools that are struggling, maybe because of children with behavioural problems, and schools that are in special measures, if they are receiving the whole support that they would need. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Sain, and I think Sarah's right there. I think we're slightly sort of going off track the last two questions, but thank you for answering as best as you can. So that's much appreciated. Did I see Councillor Marshall?
Yes, you did. Are you happy for me to come in, Chair?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So basically looking at the current situation of COVID and recovery, just about listening about how the challenges were maintained throughout the period of time from both council and EAS yourselves. How do you feel that you've both challenged yourself and the local authorities challenged you? Thank you.
If I start that question, and I'm sure Sarah will come in as well. In terms of the challenge on schools, if I start at that level first, that has adapted over that period, but where schools have not perhaps responded with their strategies for distance blended learning, that challenge has been in place collaboratively from the local authority and ourselves to encourage schools to get the right provision in place for the learners that are in their care. Ultimately, that has continued, and many of the mechanisms for that have adapted. So we went into a phase of celebrate, support, I've forgotten the second S, and refine the program. So we've been working with schools in different ways so that we are listening to school leadership, hearing what they're saying, and able to question schools on what they're doing. In terms of the processes between EAS and local authority, from our perspective, the same quality assurance procedures have been able to continue virtually with attendance at monthly quality assurance meetings between LA officers, principal school improvement partners within the local authority, where there has been challenge present, lots of dialogue. Excuse me. It's only a cold, but it's there. Lots and lots of dialogue between us on individual schools, and at that point, I'm sure Sarah may want to add more as my voice goes.
Thank you, Ed. So we have mature and regular dialogue about our experiences as a local authority and what our schools have experienced through a quality assurance session, which happens on a monthly basis. We find by ensuring that we keep this dialogue going, that problems are resolved very quickly. What has also happened over the pandemic is the JEG group, which is the Joint Executive Group of Cabinet members from across the region, has continued to monitor the performance of the EAS as well. So nothing has stopped over the pandemic. But what we have found is that our school improvement partners have been exceptionally responsive during the pandemic to the changes that are necessary and the professional learning that was necessary to keep our teachers teaching through blended learning to make sure that they were digitally competent. So we've been really pleased and with the performance of the EAS, and everything they've done for us as school improvement partners is very, very valued.
Thank you very much. And Chair, I've got further questions if happy for me to continue.
Yeah, how many have you got, Councillor Marshall? Many?
About five maximum.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So the other one is linked there. It's about new challenges. Do you foresee any new challenges or know of any past challenges that have come across because of differences of local authorities and priorities or perspectives?
Sorry, when you say differences between the past in terms of priorities?
So any in the past that may have been a challenge or anything that you foresee moving forward, is there any local authorities maybe venturing off a little bit or anything like that that may face a challenge to what Newport is trying to achieve?
We work very closely, Sarah would add to this, but the SOOC, the South East Wales Group, working with our managing director, Debbie, very, very closely. We recently had a collaborative away day virtually in terms of looking at the priorities that we collectively have, and they are very, very similar, but there's obviously subtle nuance differences between them in terms of, equity and some of the deprivation factors that come in, but those existed before the pandemic as well as they do now.
A good example, I suppose, of an individual local authority request would be that many of us have testing recommendations from the inspection of our local government services. And so within our what we call our LA Annex of the EAS business plan, there are specific actions just bespoke to Newport to ensure that we meet our goals.
Excellent, thank you. Obviously, it's positive to hear, because obviously sometimes, you know, there may be fractures and stuff, especially at difficult times such as COVID, you know, on a mass scale. So it's good to hear that obviously that there is no foreseeable challenges, or has been. That's really positive. That we're not going to its own, and the partnership regionally is very, very strong. So thank you for that one. Another one I've got is, how are you trying to maintain innovation and lead new ways of working?
Okay, in terms of innovation, a broad range of programs ongoing virtually. Some slow down slightly at the moment in terms of the engagement with teachers as schools struggle with staffing in schools and COVID requirements, but those programs are available and ongoing. I mentioned Dr. Simon Breakspear earlier. We've had a range of work with him. We've had a range of workshops with Geraint, I've forgotten his name, who's working with us from Herefordshire. Floyd Woodrow has been working with a range of school leaders to challenge thought on leadership, reflection, working with governors with governors in selected clusters as well. Attended the governor conference back in March, where we were challenging thoughts on not letting slip many of the good things that have happened and reflecting on the positive as well. And that we're not afraid to look for those external leaders to come in and help us as well, as with the work of Steve Mumby as well, in terms of curriculum reform, in terms of challenging our thoughts, challenging the thinking, particularly of secondary leadership. We've been working with Professor Mick Waters, who was head of qualifications agency in England, lots of local authority work, highly experienced, lives in Worcestershire, so he's been joining us virtually at the moment on many engagement activities to challenge the thinking of our leaders. He did a session 2 weeks ago for our secondary chairs of governors, for example, where he's challenging their thought processes ready in preparation for curriculum for Wales.
Thank you. It leads on to the other question that I've got linked with that is, obviously, if a school goes red, it seems that there's some failures. Normally, leadership is one of them. Is there any innovation towards leadership to make sure that schools have good leadership and won't fail or go into the red?
Councillor Marshall, the first thing we should point out is that categorisation isn't part of the system anymore, so there aren't any red schools. But Ed has just described the extensive leadership programmes that have been part of the professional learning menu for schools in the region. And actually that goes on at all levels, doesn't it, Ed? So we're looking at leadership of classroom teachers, we look at leadership, middle leadership, those that are considering going into deputy headship, those that are considering going into headship, so that there are those professional courses at all levels. But in addition as well, Ed referred to some of the new leadership courses which have been responsive to the pandemic. So focusing, for instance, on agile leadership. So when something changes on your landscape, how do you respond to that in an effective manner? So the menu has been effective. Is there anything you'd like to add, Ed, about that?
I wasn't going to add so much about the programmes, but to complement that, there are still, whilst the national categorisation has gone, there are still schools causing concern powers available, and there is dialogue between ourselves and colleagues in the local authority about schools causing concern, and we have mechanisms to discuss that. But as part of the national framework, there's no longer that that stamp of red, amber, yellow, green as there was previously. And also we realigned the funding as well, because the funding was linked to that model where you had up to 25 days support. As you read, there is far more flexibility according to need of schools as well, which supports those programs.
Thank you. I only note red because that's the main thing that obviously occurred at that time, and obviously it's like, how do we stop them getting to that extreme?
Yes.
Thank you for that. The other two are linked. So basically the impacts of COVID on delivery of services and what emerging lessons you have. Obviously we have heard some of it there, but is there any like key points that you wish for us to know as a committee, especially in terms of the partnership, how it may have evolved or changed in part of that delivery during COVID?
reflect briefly on how we've changed. Geraint is my boss. I think it was back in February 2020. We were planning an emergency scenario where we didn't have the office for a single day, and how we would cope. I think we've still ongoing with that emergency scenario which kicked in for us. In terms of the delivery, we have evolved, survived. We'll keep the positive practice. I think we're in a situation now where we thought we were doing this back in the autumn last year about general delivery of professional learning and events, which will need to return to more physical. Bear in mind as well, with an awful lot of our staff and an awful lot of school visits, there is that blend. So they are going into schools, partners are visiting other schools. I've visited several schools in the last few weeks to discuss issues face to face as well. So we're in that phase of retaining some of the old that worked well, but bringing back some of the old which we need as well.
If I can just add to that, if I take an example of a meeting earlier this week with the head teacher strategy group, so is your primary lead head from Newport, your secondary lead head, and with the 5, and what we've learned, and this is something we've learned through, is to listen to them. And the experience we're having at the moment, they've never, in all the terms they've had, they're finding this the most difficult term. So we're adapting now with how we support them as well, what we're delivering. I think one of the key messages they came back to us was they feel that if they don't attend the PL training, they're missing out. Yeah, so what we are looking to reduce now between the next 6 weeks, I just touched on it, 80% of what's going to happen now in the next couple of weeks. All we're doing is postponing it. That's all. We'll carry it out in the spring term, hopefully when things settle down a little bit more. So we're responding and reacting to what heads are telling us on the ground all the time and feeding that back into the system.
That's great, thank you. And before the last question, I'd just like to thank you, and it does show obviously the partnership is still strong. You know, the minds obviously COVID and everything else that you know the world wants to throw at us. So that's quite positive that way. It might sound picky, but forgive me for asking, but I think, you know, with the tables that you've noted, the different kind of greens, etc. on there, so all the different points and feedback, it's just what type of work and actions have you undertaken to try and get some of those? I'm not going to discuss about the neither agree, disagree, strongly agree, but for those big bulk that only agree, to hopefully be in the strongly agree, because I think there's a big bulk there of at least near enough 50% and a lot of the agrees. How do we challenge ourselves to get those in that circle to try and make it a lot stronger? Thank you.
Yeah, those charts are just a small part of a wider survey with a lot of qualitative feedback as well. There's work that's been done. They've not been shared as in Rod's report, but back in the organisation, we have a you said we did style tables. So we will take all the you said column, we'll take the we did column, and that then informs the approach to the next business plan. So that will be data into the consultative approach for the next business plan, and it will be included, including the quantitative as well as those qualitative.
Okay, Councillor Marshall, was that your final question?
It was. You'd be glad to hear, Chair. Thank you.
I was counting down 5. But, Councillor Sulla.
Thank you, Chair. There was one thing I wanted to say, really. You're all working collectively together, and that's the point I wanted to make. It wasn't just about the head teachers. It was all about working together, and I think you're doing that under severe circumstances. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sulla. I can't see any other hands up, so as Chair, I've only got really, because I think it's been covered, but I have got just one question, and yeah, COVID's been tough times. It's been tough times for everybody. The way you've spoken this afternoon or this evening, it seems like that in a lot of cases it's actually developed strong relationships. Am I off track there, or would that be something sort of which you would possibly go along with?
Absolutely, Chair, absolutely. I think it's been important to communicate regularly, to take the temperature of schools, and that means us and EAS colleagues talking directly to schools, and then the local authority working directly with EAS to collaborate and work up new plans. Schools, the local authority and the EAS have had to think on their feet consistently to come up with innovative practice to work within a pandemic. And so we've listened and responded to each other. So there's three partners in this collaboration. So that's schools, us and the EAS. And we walk away from the last 18 months, not quite walk away, but we reflect on the last 18 months, and it's been enormously helpful for relationships and to go back to basics, really, making sure that we're listening and responding.
Just to add one brief point to that, endorse all of it, but I think accessibility of colleagues has improved massively in terms of us to schools, our LA school interface as well. Accessibility is positive.
And just before we finished, I said it earlier to who we had in earlier, but I don't hide the fact. I'll say it again, and I know the whole committee will be behind this, so I don't have to ask them. Can you please, send back to everyone, every staff member, it feels like you've moved forward in really tough times, which is easy to say on an hour's meeting, but actually what's gone on in 18 months with everyone, it's been hard. So please send back a massive thank you to everyone involved from this committee, and because it's sometimes lost, but I can tell you it's appreciated from ourselves.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And 7:30. Just have a good evening, what's left of it, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
All the best. Neil.
Hi, Chair.
Just wait for everyone to leave and then we'll crack on. Yeah, all cameras on, just feel free. Before we sort of move on, massive thank you to all of you for the questions. It's never easy, when it's down to four of us, it's sort of it gets tougher. The more drop out, the tougher it gets. It's only four of us, but thank you. It was 5, Malcolm. Sorry,
Sorry,
I thought you'd gone, Malc. Massive thank you, because it's been, I don't know, 3 hours. And maybe I'm a bit jaded because I've done 5 hours on planning earlier. So back to Neil, do you want to do the summing up or ask the questions?
Thank you, Chair. Yep, just at the part where we just take the comments and recommendations on both of these agenda items. Some of the things that I've just noted down first of all, for the Norse joint venture, you mentioned that it was great to see the passion of the partnership and how open and transparent they were. They're not afraid to admit when something goes wrong, and they will investigate to rectify any mistakes that they've made. But they haven't articulated well enough about their benchmarking of the price comparisons, so they need to communicate that better. They need to send us information to come back with the discretionary spend for the schools. They mentioned that they need to do more to try to encourage girls to get more into the trade as well. And also Councillor Marshall about North saying that they would attend school governor meetings to have the briefings as well. Was there any further comments or recommendations that the committee would like to, for us to give to the partners?
I think it's the point, Neil, basically about the negative media and about ways of exploring that within the authority and the culture. Why there is a culture maybe against Norse.
Hello, Neil.
Yes, Councillor.
Oh, sorry.
He's typing. He's there.
He's typing at the same time. Yeah.
Neil, I think it was an unknown quantity when they first start. Because when I worked in the steelworks, we were taken over, and it's a worry of what the next people are going to be like. And I think that's why some of the negativity came into it, Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely, Tom.
Yeah.
Tom, Neil, did we mention, sorry, mate, I've just, I I sort of just got my mind's gone elsewhere. Did we mention about them agreeing to come to annual meetings?
Yep, I've got that as well. So what we do, we'll have during February time, myself and Connor, we meet with the heads of services, all the service areas, and we discuss the draft annual forward work programme, which we'll then bring to the committee. It should be around April time, I'd imagine. So once that gets agreed with the committee, we'll hopefully, would you like this to be an annual meeting around the same time, October, November time?
Oh, good, yeah.
I think so, please. Can I add a question on to that, what we learned today about our buildings and assets are about average 60 years old. So what is like the lifespan of our assets of the buildings even? I think that would be important to realise as part of, as we're scrutinising, to know what it is that they're actually maintaining for us.
It's the materials, isn't it? The roof is going to average about 60 years for roofs. Roofs should be renewed every 60 years. And
you say that, Malcolm, but we got the likes of the leisure centre, which was 40 years. So it'd be just nice to know what the portfolio is, if there is like that, to know about the new, renewing a lot of the buildings and things like that there, what that perspective is ongoing, because the average age of buildings being 60 years, that's quite an age for a building as well, especially for energy efficiency and all the rest, but it's for the age of the building.
Got that. Thanks, Councillor Marshall.
Cheers now.
Anything else?
Maybe in the future, Chair, please, that we could go out with Norse and, as long as it's safe and COVID protected, to go to these places and say, right, Norse can say this is what we're doing to protect the buildings, schools, or like where I live in sheltered housing in Woodside, anything like that, to see what they're doing.
Do you know what, Tom? Funny enough, sort of in the meeting, I was sort of, I don't know how this sits, but in the meeting, I thought I wouldn't mind a day out here to see actually what goes on. And I don't know if we can do that as a committee or just as councillors, but I sort of know where you're coming from. I just wouldn't mind a day. It's a bit like going out with the police, going out with Noy. I just wouldn't mind a day out. Yeah, I know Steve Marshall's got a lot of time in his hands. He hardly works. So.
I actually was thinking the reason why you were laughing when they said the virtual day out.
A virtual day out? What was that?
I mean, a real day out.
Stayed at home and had a virtual day out, and they had a day out. Sorry, Neil, to go off track.
I understand.
It's in now at 20 to 8.
No, a couple of years ago, we tried to organise a site visit for waste savers, but that was something which didn't materialise. Is that something, for this councillor, Sully, is that something you look into do? Have a site visit of where they go to do their work, or just wondering if you'd like me to word it, really.
Well, can I come in on that? Well, with waste savers, right, they're having problems now. The drivers are being taken by heavy vehicles, goods. They're stealing them away, if you want to put it that way. And they got a shortage of drivers. And I think in all wards, they have problems with their collections. I don't know if other councillors have the same problems.
I haven't noticed it as yet, but
Chair, can I ask that this is put forward when we're talking about the future scrutiny plans, because we're still talking about the reports, if you don't mind, just so we're in order.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Sorry, Tom, I'm just thinking.
Right. I think he is struggling, but yeah, we can put that forward then, Steve.
I'm just thinking there, with the fact of the partnership, I think it was quite strong on that basis, and it does seem that they have a working relationship and know a lot of the issues. I think it's just the kind of concerns about the negative, stories and things like that put forward, but generally the function that they seem quite open and honest, as you said, and transparent. So I think the partnership does seem strong. There's a lot to learn. They identified that a lot of significant things there, but I think majority of it is pretty much strong, and I think that is reflected in what we heard.
Yeah, probably stronger than I thought, to be honest, Steve.
Yeah,
it's good to see that, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Sorry, Neil, have we gone off track here?
Oh no, that's right. If we just come back, and so is the committee happy with all the comments and recommendations that we make to Norse? Are we happy to go on to comments about the value for money report?
Yes, Chair. I think I'm okay with it, yeah.
Yeah,
was you happy with the information which was given to you today? Was there any more information that you were looking for, or are you happy with everything that you were given?
Yeah, but I mentioned about the numbers, right? There's a lot of people who haven't got emails or computers, and the only way they can get through to these people is through phone numbers. And of course, they said they'd send numbers to us, didn't they?
That's the Norse one, Tom, yeah?
Yeah, Norse, yeah. It's important that people know where to go.
Right, I know that they got the numbers on the presentation, which I'll have that sent to the committee as well. But I know we can add. They should be on the intranet, or the contacts for Norse. But we can see if there is something we can do, maybe have like a staff bulletin just to remind members of staff, you know, in schools that if they do wish to report anything to Norse, you know, these are the email address for the front desk and the telephone numbers. We can certainly do that, Councillor.
Thank you.
I would add though, with the having more information about the size and scale of projects that Norse is behind, like about the transporter bridge and things like that. They're massive scale things which I didn't realise they were behind, because I obviously assumed that other organisations were contracted to do that. So to have Norse behind that would be interesting to see case studies of the type of work that they carry out. You know, not just in schools. The fact that major items in the city are also conducted by them as well, which would have been, you know, useful as part of that.
No problem at all. Thanks for that, Councillor Marshall. I've got that.
Cheers, Neil. Thank you.
Can I give my apologies, Chair, and all right to leave the meeting at the minute?
Yeah, go on, mate. Go on.
Yes. Thank you all.
Okay, so take care. Bye bye.
So then, were we happy with the information we got regarding the value for money? I was. I said it out there.
Yeah.
I haven't got a huge amount of knowledge on that side, but what I saw, I could understand, and it was enough for me.
Yeah, with the ES, you mean, is it? Oh, you mean the Norse? Sorry, Norse. You're still talking about Norse, are we?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. But perhaps the words I should have used was collectively. You know, which I did on the last question. But it's working together.
I think the information was good. I think it's just the concerns alluded of the fact that they are sounding like they're now at the drop of the, you know, with the question about the third staff drop. Say that again. So dropping a third of their staff in terms of the total figure, and they are now at the crux of whether or not they'll be able to provide a good enough service. I think that is something that we are concerned about. I don't know about you, but I'm definitely concerned as a committee member about that. And I think that just needs to be raised, that we're concerned about that, even though we know they are adhering, they're doing well to work with what they have and the resources that they have. I think, you know, hopefully committee members would agree as a committee that we do have concerns about maybe the future situation surrounding it.
Yeah, I think it's sort of because, you know, we've just come out of something and we're going possibly into the unknown still. There are those concerns.
Yeah, well, that's did I make a point about saying about the grants? I saying if I made that point, didn't I, Stephen, about if they haven't got any grants from anywhere, where are they going to go? You know.
Can we put that in there, Neil?
Yeah, sure. Just putting that in there, Chair.
Yeah, does that make sense, Chair?
You're asking me?
Well, you're the Chair. I think it does.
Nothing makes sense. Nothing makes sense to me, Tom.
How about you, Stephen? You're good at figures.
Does.
I think so.
Right.
Does. Seeing you enjoying these committee meetings.
I do, yes, it's good.
Not you, Councillor Hussain.
Oh yeah, she loves it, don't you, Fazina?
She's on mute.
You're on mute.
You're not.
I haven't attended meetings like these before, and I am enjoying them. So I'm actually still learning as well what kind of questions I should ask and how much I should be involved. I mean, I've taken a lot of from Stephen Marshall. I think your questions never end. But it's good. Some of the questions you ask actually are in my mind as well, so I don't bother asking them because they've already been asked.
I'm more concerned that some of his questions are in your mind. That doesn't say don't. None of his questions are in my mind, I can promise you. No, but no, it is. It's a little bit like going to full council and things like that. These meetings, probably the first 2, 3 or 4, for me, it was just sitting there. And again, when you're in a room, it's more difficult, but just listening to the experience and listening to the people and just, you know, getting that feel of how it works and what to say, really. So I totally get that.
Yeah, and now I'm left on my own as well, so that's even harder.
Bill, anything else?
The workload has gone from here to there.
It has.
Future work plan.
Yeah.
So
it's all about scrutiny, Chair, isn't it? You and that's what we're doing, isn't it?
Go on, Neil. Exactly.
Was there any other comments or recommendations that you would like us to leave with the partners for EAS, or are you happy for me to send as is?
Neil, just the fact that during the last 18 months, obviously, of the situation, that we feel that they've conducted themselves well, even though they did a test run, they pretty much are still in that test run, but you know what I mean in that way. But they've kind of risk assessed them each other well. The challenges have been maintained. And I think basically they're not afraid of innovation moving forward, which they stipulated, which is really positive. And I think that it's still a very strong, positive relationship, if not stronger, because of what COVID has allowed and the kind of more direct routes and everything that was mentioned. So, I think a very good, strong partnership indeed.
I think also, if you can put in the notes, Neil, about, I don't know if you can or not, about the committee sort of thanking everyone involved.
That's Dane. Thanks, Chair. Okay, last part of the meeting, Chair, is just our scrutiny advisor report. So it's just to advise of the next 2 upcoming meetings. On Wednesday, the 17th of November, we've got the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, discussing the developments undertaken in the partnerships with Cardiff City Council on behalf of the Welsh Government. This is a new agenda item. This would be Sally Ann Jenkins and Natalie Poyner, the service manager, coming to do a presentation and to advise of this report. Then on Wednesday, the 1st of December, we've got the violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence. This is normally an annual report as well. It didn't come last year because of COVID, but it's returning this year. Again, we got Sally Ann Jenkins returning, and we've got Mary Ryan attending too. And we've also got the update on the SRS, the Shared Resource Services. So we'll have the Chief Officer from SRS, we'll have Rhys Cornwall as well, and Mark Blizzard, and also Dominic Gibbons. And then it's just on the action sheet, it's just the actions that the committee have undertaken. We've sent over the recommendations over to the PSB and just updated the forward work programme. I think that's it for that, Chair, unless the committee got anything they wish to add.
I think on the future work programme, Neil, if you don't mind through the Chair, basically adding in Tom's point about way savers and the potential for that.
Would that be for the site visit?
Yeah, potentially in the new year, but just to add it in somewhere on that as a note, please.
Last noted. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so is that everything covered, Neil?
Yep, that's everything, Chair.
Just before we cut off, I don't know if Connor and Felicity are also on. Just a massive thank you to everyone behind the scenes and putting this together. I know sort of it's us asking the questions and sort of popping up here and there, but I promise you, you're not forgotten, and really appreciate your time. So to everyone, have a safe evening. Just stay safe. Keep in touch for the next few meetings. Try and make massive meetings coming up. Neil, for everyone, thank you for your time, and everyone behind the scenes. Thank you very much, and have a good evening, everyone. Good night.
Well said,
everyone.
Here. Cheers all.
Good night all.
Thank you.